I knew I was missing something.
We're not live on YouTube for what it's worth.
Yeah, I know. I noticed. I forget. I have to individually hit go live on there because it does stupid stuff. So I'm waiting for it to kind of like do its thing, which it's not doing. I don't know why. Seriously. Come on. Error. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Such what? What do you mean not experiencing enough? What are you talking about, YouTube? It's still not showing like it's gone. We'll see. Hey, Hummus. Hey, Josh. Hopefully they're seeing us. I don't know. Every time I go live, I have trouble finding my own stream, like actually going live. Okay, so I have everybody here on the main thing for
Struggle is real.
For Rumble, but I don't seem to see YouTube going. There we go. Okay, there it goes. All right. Actually going live. Okay. Cool. All right. So I think we're live everywhere. Holy crap. It would not be a RetroRoots show if I didn't cause problems at the beginning of the show. Hi.
Same with my podcast. Y'all know I had technical issues all the time and getting kicked off.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I know, dude. I'd be watching one of your streams and I'm like, wait a minute, what happened? And you're like, well, we just got demonetized. And I'm like, wait, what?
Big Brother didn't like what we were talking about.
Did not. What's up, Mazen? All right, so let's see if chat is actually... Yeah, there's one chat.
Yep, chat is popping. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, we got people popping in here. I'm gonna move this over here, and I'm gonna move this over here, and then I'm gonna continue to kind of mess with these windows because I don't know which ones. There we go. Okay, I think I got these organized. All right, so I have to do a bunch of weird stuff to get things set up, and so I was running tight on time. I blame Matthews. It's all his fault tonight.
Fair enough. I'll take it.
Right,
I feel so
we do have a
little guilt anyway. I might as well just take all the blame.
Do what?
I feel so little guilt from day to day that I might as well just take all the blame anyway.
That's fair. That's fair. You have
how do I
okay.
acquire that? What weapon upgrade do I need for that?
You just gotta be dead inside is what it comes down to.
Like seriously, what can I equip myself with to have that?
I don't know, but I probably won't be pulling as much stuff up on the main stream because I have like this window in here I'm afraid to touch because it kills my stream every time I touch it. So if you guys don't see your name popping up, I apologize. If it is, it's probably going to be delayed because OBS Studio's been very finicky and I'm afraid to touch it.
I know that.
Oh man, I got the. They're saying I have like the echo, the reverb.
Oh, you've got the echo there? Okay. I wonder if that's something I can do.
Except we're wearing the headphones. I don't have speakers going on.
I do know. I mean, you have them when I came in, but I didn't have...
That's weird. I didn't hear the echo. Loud and clear on my end.
Is it? Because I'm getting a little bit of a reverb on him, but I know I've got all the streams muted. Because I was checking that.
Mazen says I sound like
didn't have
a
anything
robot.
turned on
So...
that would cause it. Why Rob sounds like a robot?
Because he's a robot master himself.
I'm going to make sure I don't have like another window up that's doing something weird that it shouldn't be doing. Because if I have like another window up that's not muted that has like the stream going.
Josh is saying it sounds better.
Okay. Oh, so
and
it sounds
hummus.
better now?
It sounds all right now, guys?
Okay.
Hummus?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, if it's good, we're good.
Let's go.
What's up, Galaxy? Yeah, we have MrMatthews here and we have my buddy Zombie. These are two amazing people that primarily do YouTube. Matthews, I know you have a Rumble channel, but you've not really gotten traction on it. You want it because you just do uploads. You don't really care much for streaming, which is
I just use it as like a secondary upload point to like YouTube, so I'm not like
doing anything exclusively to Rumble. So.
Right, and I haven't really been doing I've been doing some streaming that's exclusive because that's where I've been doing most of my main streaming, except for this show, which goes live on both, which makes for a more hectic evening when I set things up. It's worth it because I'm never going to pull the show off of YouTube for as long as it's running, just because that's where everybody started supporting the show, and there's too many people that like to just watch the show there, and I don't want to pull that off of there ever. The other streaming, I don't feel like fits on the channel that I have there, so it's either setting up another channel to dual stream or just do it on Rumble. And right now I've been too lazy to try to set up another channel, so it's just been on Rumble. When I do like just the normal retro stuff or, you know, the fighting game stuff where I get all frustrated, which the YouTube crowd would probably love, even though it frustrates me. So, but tonight we wanted to talk handhelds. Mike did not want to be involved in the show because he's a pansy. That's right. You heard me, sir. So I brought on 2 replacements. Trust me, this is more than enough. Like, I could have put a puppet to replace Mike, but I chose real people.
I would have paid to see the puppet.
Yeah. Let's see the puppet first before we commit to this.
Yeah. Is it a sock puppet? Is it a Muppet?
You know, it doesn't matter. It could be a stick. It doesn't matter.
With a plate on it. Mario, Mike the Muppet here.
But
Mike, we love you.
he's not into handheld gaming, and this is a topic I've been wanting to do for a while. And I know Matthews is really big in handheld gaming, as Game Boy is one of your favorite consoles, if I do recall. And we have Zombie, who's huge into handheld gaming. And you were telling me before the show that even your kids got into handheld gaming as well,
Yes,
right?
sir. Mm-hmm. He's loving the Switch handheld setup he's got right now, but he's also taking a love for Tiger games.
Tiger games, oh my God. We all had those. We all got those. And I don't know that any of us ever like truly loved them, but we had a lot of them.
Me.
Okay.
I'll go into detail why that is. It's simple.
No, I'm totally fine with that. Now, I don't know where you guys want to start on this. If you care where we start on this, if we just want to do train of thought of which ones we like the most. If you guys want to go on to like the stuff like the macro vision and stuff like that. If you guys ever mess with that, because I never had one.
I have one.
Oh, you have one?
Yes, I do.
Oh, this is a fantastic place to start then. For you guys who don't know, the first handheld game console that had interchangeable carts was not the Game Boy. That was just the one that made it popular. There was one by, I believe it was Mattel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Zombie.
Milton Bradley, sir. But
Milton Bradley, that's it. That made the Macrovision, and the entire faceplate thing would pop open, and you would put like a whole new plate in and collapse it back down, and it just had like a very basic display. It did like 4-bit at best, and only one color. I mean, it was like bare bones basic stuff, but it gave you multiple games on one handheld. Zombie can probably go into that more. I'm going to give you the floor on that one because you actually own one. This is amazing. I didn't think I knew anybody who owned one, actually.
I sure do, and as nerdy as it sounds, I'm proud to own that thing because it is definitely a relic in history, which is kind of what my focus in collecting is nowadays. You pretty much highlighted all the important points about what makes the Microvision important. It was the first handheld with interchangeable carts, made by Milton Bradley, came out in 1979, I want to say.
Yeah, and that tracks pretty close to what I remember. Yeah.
It used to sell for like $50, and it came with at least a Arkanoid breakout ripoff called Blockbuster. Yeah. And it was pretty basic gameplay. You just slap the plates on. You got a different setup and different commands. The Star Trek game is, I think, the popular one among collectors, and it was definitely a battery eater because it takes I think it takes 3 9-volts or 1 9-volt and some other combination of batteries. It's been a while since I've actually played mine. And yeah, I mean, for what it was, it definitely was moving up there in terms of cementing what Tiger would do later, what the Game & Watch was in the progress of doing. You know, it's not impressive by any means whatsoever, but it's a really cool piece of history in terms of where video gaming was going and the portability factor alone.
I honestly think it's pretty, and well, the reason I think it's impressive is because of the time window, right? Yeah. The time window of which that thing came out and what it could do floored me when I found out about it, because I didn't find out about it until I started researching for the channel, right? Because everybody's always going, well, I just like, you knew all this stuff. No, I did not. Like, what on earth? And if you guys are seeing chat pop up, there we go. Okay. I didn't know any of this stuff. Like the whole basis of the Geekstorian channel, at least as far as YouTube, because the Rumble one is kind of like part that and part me just fucking about with video games, is to educate myself on a lot of game history and share what I find with other people. So you can either tell me what you know about it, which may be things that I don't know, or more than I know about it, or learn something about it yourself, right? And maybe get you curious to go find something else out that you can throw at me, then I can then go do some digging, and we all kind of learn together as part of the channel, right? That was sort of the basis of the idea of the channel, and to kind of keep things short and concise. So I found about this thing when I was learning to look at handhelds, older ones, because I started with the Game Boy. Well, actually, I started with the Game & Watch. So I had some of those, and I had a couple of Tiger handhelds. And Matthews, I think you've got a couple of the Game & Watches too, right? Now you've got a bunch of Tigers, right?
I have one Game & Watch now. I never actually had any of the Game & Watches when I was a kid. I had a bunch of the Tiger ones. That was what I had mainly, and they were fine. Like we all accepted those as really good handheld systems until the Game Boy came out.
Yeah. Once the Game Boy came out, that was a whole new ball game. Not only was it more advanced graphically, it also had the interchangeable cards, which for most of our generation, that was the first time we ever saw anything like that, because you either had the individual Tiger handhelds that ran for like $10 to $12 a piece around the time, or you had the Game & Watch ones, which were like, I want to say those were closer to like 20 or 30 a piece. They were usually considered more high end, if I recall. And they usually kept those in the places that I went. They kept them actually in like a game case, because they'd have these glass display cases they kept everything in, like at Sears and stuff. And they were always in those when I went, if I recall. Mr. T800.
Wrapped in that god awful plastic protection box or container, which whatever you want to call them.
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the Game Boy itself was just like a huge eye opener for all of us. I mean, I don't think I've ever played more Tetris than when I got the Game Boy.
Yeah.
That was like a go-to game for like a long time, not only because it was the only game I had, but because it was just a huge amount of fun on a game that I hadn't played before. I can't remember if the NES version came out before. I think it did. Didn't it come out before the Game Boy? Because the Game Boy was
came out around the same time. Because I remember, of course, the Tetris commercial, the two Russian bears talking to each other. Okay, everything was Tetris. The Tetris. What's worse? Tetris comes on Game Boy. It was. You remember this cartoon? Okay.
Yeah.
I think they actually did come out simultaneously. I think.
Did they? Okay.
Am I still in the robot voice here?
I think it's
didn't sound like it, but if it is, it's cool.
Well, I don't think it's cool. I sound fine here in the room.
I mean, you sound a little bit like Soundwave. I mean, it's kind of cool.
That's like the ultimate compliment. Plug in any modules you need to. I want that voice.
I'm gonna call Matthews a Decepticon and just say Matthews Superior.
Well, as long as I can be one of the cool ones, that's fine.
Yeah, but you better wave that badge of honor around, because Decepticons are awesome.
The bad guys always have the best designs. So.
Yeah, of course. But they always had to be the bumbling idiots.
A few of them did, mostly Starscream. Oh, speaking of which, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but they did the Transformers 40th thing. Probably came and went already. I went with a buddy to see that on Sunday, and it was not what I expected. I thought it was going to be the movie, but it was the first 4 episodes of the cartoon, with the very first episode having a read from the remaining cast and whoever they could get to replace a few of the other characters, right? Because like Casey Kasem's dead now, right? So you'd have somebody else read for Jazz and people like that. it was honestly quite a bit of fun. It was a much bigger crowd and a much more diverse crowd than I thought. There were a lot of like younger kids, like teenagers in there with like Transformers and shit, and dads in there with their kids and everything. It was kind of amazing.
Yeah, for some reason I thought it was the movie too, but now that you mentioned it, I remember it when I looked closer at the poster because I saw it advertised when we went to go see the Planet of the Apes movie, and I was like, oh,
Right.
it's showing the TV show. Okay, well, I'd rather see the movie.
I think I probably would have preferred the movie myself, but I still had a really good time. My biggest downside to it is I wish they had done the reading portion for all 4 of the episodes. They only did it for the first one. I thought that was kind of a bummer. That was my biggest downside to it as far as an event for that day. That would have preferred the movie personally, but you know, to each their own. I imagine that might come out because I don't think it's quite the 40th anniversary of the movie yet. I think that's in a couple of years, so maybe that'll still happen. Who knows? But we were talking Game Boy, and Matthews, I'm going to let you kind of take it here for a minute because your channel is, at least lately, it has been heavily focused on Game Boy, much to I think everybody's delight because it is definitely a console that you're hugely passionate about.
Yeah, I'm passionate about it. I don't know that the Game Boy still has the, I guess quite the following of like the NES or the Super Nintendo. But the people who love the Game Boy, I think, really love it. And there isn't really a whole lot of channels out there dedicated to the Game Boy, so that's kind of been my thought process. But yeah, because I had the NES. And before that, I had the Atari. But when I got the Game Boy was like became my most prized possession, and I was just like incredibly attentive to this stupid little thing. I would clean the screen constantly. I would always make sure my hands were clean. I'd keep it in the case at all times when I was not playing it. I would actually save all the cardboard boxes and all the plastic trays for all the games, and I'll keep the games always in the cardboard boxes in their little trays when I'm not playing them. I was just ridiculous about this damn thing, more so than I was about anything else I owned.
See, I got that way with some of the early Ghostbusters, the real Ghostbusters series when they came out, because they were super detailed when they first came out. And I remember being really, those and Silverhawks, I remember being really picky about how those got stored because of how detailed they were. So I could totally see that with the Game Boy. Now, when I finished my Game Boy games, I always put them back in the plastic case that came for each one of the Game Boy games. I was meticulous about doing that. Now, I wasn't good about keeping the boxes. You would have hated my boxes because half of them either got destroyed on opening or got squished or got thrown in the trash, or you know how we all were around that time. We weren't really,
and I was like that with
ahead.
Just about everything else. Like my NES boxes, garbage.
Yeah.
But I would, because I had the one of the.
I know we're hurting Zombie Soul right now.
I had one of the main Game Boy carrying. I think we could all kind of picture it, just the standard carrying case for the Game Boy. One half had the Game Boy, the other one actually had the 4 slots for the games. So I would keep 4 games that the 4 ones that I was mainly focused on playing at that time. I'll keep those in the case with the Game Boy, and then for every other game I had, and I had like I eventually had like 30 games. I would keep them in their cardboard boxes in a shelf in a drawer, all closed up. So I think when I got rid of my Game Boy library, they're probably still in mint condition. I had games like Mega Man 5 in the box.
That must have made some collector hugely happy.
Maybe. I don't think so. I'd be willing to bet they probably got completely junked by the time that, because I was in high school, so this was 1997, and I pawned them. I pawned them just so I can like have an extra $80 to go out with my fucking girlfriend. And she's not in the picture anymore. So I mean, that was like
that's how my NES went. My Super
to my
Nintendo,
girlfriend?
like all those, either got sold at a yard sale, or they got traded in so I could get credit to like buy the next console.
So with that in mind, I do believe that my old Game Boy games,
wings of silver, nerves of steel.
I do think that my old Game Boy games probably still are out there in the world somewhere, but by the time that any kind of retro collecting came into existence, 13, whatever.
Yeah, I feel like people were collecting it before, but it was a lot more niche.
Maybe.
Right? Like, you had people who just wanted to collect it, but you also had, like, a ton of people like us that just didn't really think it was going to be a thing for whatever reason. And, or at least me, and didn't think it was going to be a thing and just kind of moved on. And now I've gotten older, I'm kind of like, at least the handheld stuff I kind of wish I had kept or I had gotten more of, because I never got stuff like, I never got the Game Boy Color. I never got the Game Boy Advance. Like, I dipped out for a long time. I had the Game Gear, right? But I never got, I kind of dipped in and out of the handheld scene. And as it's kind of come full circle again, and it feels like more and more devices were kind of going almost either mobile or handheld. And everybody kind of getting in the market, and this seemed like a really good time to kind of cover it, you know, as far as our memories of it, kind of how we grew up on it and what drew us to it, and kind of where we think it's going, right? So that's kind of why I wanted to get all you guys together today, is to kind of go into that kind of topic, right? So, I mean, you had that one. Did you have the Color or the Advance? Did either of you guys? Well, I bet you Zombie had all. You said you had pretty much all of them, right, Zombie?
Except for an original Advance.
Okay.
Yeah. When the Game Boy Color came out, that was the talk of the town. And I was thinking, well, should I get one or should I hold off about this new Advance system that's coming out? So what ended up happening was I got the Color for Christmas, the Advance nowhere to be seen. And then when I was saving up to get an Advance, then I learned about the SP. So every time I had a chance to get one, I was skipping onto the next technology.
See, Galaxy had the Game Gear, and he had the GBA. See, I skipped the GBA for whatever reason, and I think it's just because I'd gotten out of handhelds around then. Because I went from Game Boy, and was still playing my Game Boy when I got my Game Gear, but I played my Game Gear a lot too. So I had stuff like Mortal Kombat, I had stuff like Chacon, I think I had Sonic. I had one of the Ninja Gaidens where you had like the different colored ninjas and stuff like that on it. I remember I had like 10, 15, maybe even up to 20 games from my Game Boy. I remember pretty vividly Castlevania Adventure, which I thought was phenomenal but drove me crazy. And then Turtles, the Turtles game, Fall the Foot Clan, I think. Matthews, you can correct me easily if I'm wrong.
That's right.
Because I loved that game. Was a blast. I had so much fun with that game. And then I also had Tetris, and I know I had a bunch of others, but those are the ones that like stood out in my memory the most. I feel like I had a couple of the Mario Adventure games too. I couldn't remember if it was like 6 golden coins or if it was the first one, but I remember having a lot of fun with that. And I remember, and this could be indistinguishable, but I remember it had like a submarine that you were in at one point. But I can't remember if that was 1, 2, or both.
That's one.
Okay. So it was the first one I had. I don't think I had 6 golden coins in. Yeah, the Guilty Gear, the Game Gear one with Shinobi. I don't know why I'm saying Guilty Gear. Probably because it's been on my brain lately. With the different colored ninjas, that was a great game. And Chacon on that one was way more balanced than the Genesis one. I never played the Genesis one until later. And so every time I said Chacon was a good game, you guys are all like, "Dude, that game's brutal. What are you talking about?" Because I was playing the Game Gear one. Which I contend is the superior game.
I must be a sucker for punishment because I love both ports of it.
See, I never tried Ninja Gaiden on Game Gear, and I didn't play. I don't know why, but I never played the Game Boy one. I was watching Panda stream it the other night. That game looks phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Like that. That's the good. Ninja Gaiden on there, and honestly, the Contra on there looks good too. The Operation C, I think it's called.
Yeah, Operation C is really good. I don't know about the Alien Wars that's on the Game Boy, but
I didn't even know really Alien Wars dropped on there. That just sounds ridiculous to me.
It is ridiculous.
But then Alien Wars, the more I've gotten into it, because the more of the games I played, or at least had exposure to, because I've only beaten the first one in Galuga. I've never played. I've dabbled in Super C a little bit. But I find that one a little bit too relentless, and I don't like the pacing as well as I do the first Contra. Hardcore.
Wait for it.
I know that's going to get a clip because I can never say that right. Hardcore or whatever you want to call it. That one's good, but that one's also super relentless, and I struggle to be able to get very far in that one. Alien Wars I can get further, but I just don't feel like it's as good as the others for whatever reason. I don't hate it as much as some of you guys do. I just don't think it's as good.
Now, Operation C on the Game Boy is pretty darn good. So, if you haven't given a whole lot of time to that one, I would definitely look into it.
Yeah, I kind of want to get some of them on emulation. I realized I didn't have any Game Boy library at all on my Steam Deck, and I'm like, why? Why didn't I do that? Like, I truly don't understand why I didn't do that, because I think I even have Game Gear games on here, so it makes no sense why I don't have Game Boy games. Because I threw some Game Boy Color on there, and I'm like, why am I missing OG Game Boy games? It's very odd. Because it's the one I would have found myself, that and the Advance would have been the ones I would have found myself gravitating to. The Advance, because I missed it, and going back and looking at a lot of those games in retrospect, I'm like, oh my god, this console looks like it's amazing. This game just had, like, game after game after game after game, and good translations of things that were on, like, the Super Nintendo and stuff, just graphically enhanced. And stuff from the NES that got graphically enhanced, like Super Mario Brothers 3 and stuff like that I would have loved back in the day, but I never picked it up, and I was like kicking myself for not owning this thing back in the day by the time I got to it. And then we have to talk about the elephant in the room of some of these things too. Eventually we'll get to them, like the TurboGrafx Express and the Nomad, that we'll get to at some point. But I kind of want to let you guys kind of do more of your thoughts on some of these other ones before we get into those that were basically emulating consoles.
So I have a question, and I posted this in chat, but I'm curious on your experiences with this. What drew you all to the Game Boy? Like, do you remember what it was? Was it a commercial? Did you see it in a store and you just had to have it?
I think it was. I don't know what drew me to the Game Boy more so than like the NES. But I have such fond memories of those two commercials. Obviously the one where he's fighting the robot with a speaker in his little
right.
That thing's awesome. I love that commercial.
But also the Mario Land commercial is really iconic also. And it was just kind of stuck in my memory more so than any other NES commercial I ever watched as a kid. And I think what actually drew me to the Game Boy in particular was that I didn't really notice that the graphics were kind of taking a hit when they're trying to shrink down the NES graphics, because it's the same bit as the NES. It's still an 8-bit system, so it can do NES accurate graphics. It's either got to be either blown up or shrunken down by half. So
right.
I didn't really see that, so I just saw it as like a direct. Hey, it's just like my NES in my room, only it's in black and white. So and now I could play all these NES games on the car ride, and we drove everywhere. So I took the Game Boy everywhere. So I think because I carried it with me so much, that's what just kind of latched on. Like, I'm going to be devoting all my energy into this system since it's going to be with me for my entire day. So that's when the NES, I think, probably became more of a secondary console for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's just I either saw the commercials or I saw it in the store, and I was like, oh my god, it's a handheld game, because I'd had a bunch of like the Tiger ones, right? And so when I saw that, it was kind of an eye opener of like, wait, you can change carts, and the games look this good. Oh my god, I need this. This is amazing. Because usually I had like some form of like Tiger handheld or something with me on the go, right? Like, be it like a Simon's Quest one, or like one of the old Turtle ones, the big Konami one or something like that, on the go. But the Game Boy was just on a whole other level, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to have something like that when I was on the go, or we were taking a trip or something like that, and I could sit down and play it, was kind of amazing. Now that came with its own challenges, as you guys know, because too much light, too little light, and you struggled to see the screen, right? it'd get dark and you'd need something like the Game Boy Light in order to be able to see it, which happily had a bit of a magnifier, which made it easier to use at night. But even that had its own batteries, and the batteries on that didn't last nearly as long as the batteries in the Game Boy itself. And, so you had all these interesting hurdles that we had with like these early games. And it's not like the Tiger stuff was any better, because none of that was really all that well backlit either. So if you're playing one of those at night, you're still struggling with a similar thing, right?
Well,
go ahead, Zombie. Go ahead. You want to go Tiger? Go Tiger. Go.
I was going to say, well, not entirely true. As we know that Tiger was the dollar store equivalent of what the Game Boy was. Everything that Nintendo did, Tiger did as well. So there is actually a magnifying light attachment you can connect to Tiger games.
Really?
Okay, I didn't know that they had one of those.
It's a very unknown fact, believe me, because most of the time, what did you get? The handheld itself, that was it.
Yeah,
But
and
they
not
did
all the
actually create one.
handhelds. Well, okay, they weren't all Tiger, to be fair. But they didn't all have the same form factor, which would have made that kind of challenging to an extent, I would think.
Yeah, but they do have a magnifying light attachment that worked similar to the one that Newbie made for the Game Boy when it first launched. It uses different batteries, but it's the same capability, and it actually does enhance the screen really well. So whether you're using the light or not, you can see that horrid display a lot better. I actually I showed a few pictures of mine on my Discord. I've got one factory sealed still, and I actually have one that my son uses when he plays Marble Madness.
Wait, they did a Marble Madness Tiger game?
Yes, they did.
That sounds awful. Because Marble Madness needs such twitch controls and touchy controls already. Trying to do that on Tiger sounds awful.
I would agree had I not gotten used to it, just like tank controls on Resident Evil.
Okay, that's fair, but I never got used to those either, so I can't count myself among the converted for that. I struggled like hell with that.
Yeah. But it actually has some okay functionality, and just like I'm sure Mr. Matthews could name off a bunch of great games on Game Boy. I could do the same for Tiger handhelds because there are some decent ones out there. Now, granted, some of the good ones might actually fetch a pretty penny, but that's where you have to decide: do you want to own that thing or not?
Right.
My favorite, because I had like maybe half a dozen of those Tiger handhelds, and my favorite ones were the ones that were not based on licensed games. I think bowling and skeet shooting were my two favorite games, which were, I thought, way better than like Mega Man 2 or Double Dragon.
Yeah. And you're talking about the launch titles, like what
got
people invested in those. Yeah, generic bowling, football, things like that. It wasn't until the licensing came in that people were like, oh my gosh, Mega Man 2 on the go, Shinobi on the go.
Yeah, I think that's when I dipped into them, but I think I agree with Matthews. I think having some of the more original ones like bowling and stuff like that would probably be more fun because it would lean itself more to that type of display.
Yeah. And they're pretty simplistic, and that's what, got the attention of a lot of people. It's so strange how primitive that technology was. Even if you had a Game Boy, you still had them. It was so weird. Like, why would we be investing or trying to get our hands on these when we have a Game Boy or a Game Gear or an Atari Lynx? And
well, I mean, part of the reason that I had so many of them is because you got them for like birthday.
Yeah,
I got them
made
for
a
birthday
really easy
presents
gift
and
on a
Christmas
boy's birthday
presents
party.
and stocking stuffers and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't think I ever actually asked for any of those games, but I had a lot of them.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how we ended up with a lot of those, right? And Hummus here, I left this comment up for a while. He said, I got my little brother the original GBA without the backlight. He set it on the ground, and her sister came in late, probably drunk, and stepped right on it. That hurts me watching. That just hurt me to read, man. The Contra, Tiger Electronic, I had the Simon's Quest one, and I'll admit, I had a lot of fun with the Simon's Quest one. I enjoyed that one as a kid. I remember playing it a lot. I don't think I had the Contra one. I might have had the Mega Man one. I'm pretty sure I had a Batman one at one point.
Yes, there's quite a few Batman ones. The first one that came out was the one based off the movie.
Yeah, and that's probably the one I had because I was big into like the '89 movie, and I remember having the NES game. I remember having the Genesis game, so it makes sense that I would have gotten like the Tiger game at some point too.
Yeah, not a bad choice either, and it's still pretty average price if anybody's looking for that one.
Yeah, I thought
but
about
yeah, a
getting
lot
some of the
of
newer release ones because they had a Transformers one and they
yep,
had an X-Men
the
one that
re-release.
dropped. And I
Re-release.
can't remember if they did any more of them after that, but they were doing like a bunch of those for like just like retro feels.
I think
right?
Sonic.
There's
Sonic
a
3 was one of them, right? The
Yes.
re-releases.
Did they do a Sonic 3?
Yes, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Same 2-button control too, just the D-pad and a giant round button. That's all.
Dude, that was the weirdest thing about those is they never did come up with like any kind of standardized control. They were always completely
No.
customized to the game. So and it was the same way with the Game and Watch stuff. The Game and Watch stuff, which eventually ended up coming out with like what we know of as the D-pad, for the most part,
Right.
was kind of an innovation that came out of the necessity of needing to save space on the devices that you're carrying on the go. But they could never quite figure out how they wanted to do that. Sometimes they were individual buttons like you see on the Switch today. Sometimes it would be like the D-pad like we know from the SNES and the NES, and anything in between, right? Sometimes it'd just be 2 buttons on the left for like left and right, and 1 big button on the right hand side. Like anything went, right?
Yeah.
This is like the Wild West of handhelds. Nobody had made any decisions on anything or had any idea what they wanted it to look like or function like or act like. And it was kind of a really interesting time to kind of be into it in that early era from there into the Game Boy. Because I feel like once the Game Boy hit, things started getting a lot more standardized in my mind.
Right. And to their credit too, whether we're talking about Tiger or the Game & Watches, having the different controllers did allow for left-handed players to actually get in some action. So that was actually kind of a nice little toss-up. And like you said, eventually once we hit the Game Boy, things became more standard. You weren't seeing that change in controls, but I have to give it credit for that. Even though they were awkward designs at times, it still allowed for more versatility.
I never really felt like any of them were like awkward. I thought they worked good for what they were, but they were definitely not meant to be flexible and compatible across multiple games, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were tailor-made for that particular experience. It's kind of like the old LED football one, right? And it worked, and it did exactly what it needed to do, the way it needed to do it. You had to use a lot of your imagination in order to make it work. Well, you did. I mean, you've got like a little red dot, right? That's what you've got.
Mm-hmm.
And that was advanced at the time,
Yeah, it was.
And we just got a raid on Rumble from Zatris. Thank you very much, Zatris. It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. I just wanted to stop and say that. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. It was just amazing at the time to see all these things coming in. Like, you had your Zelda, but it wasn't the same Zelda, right?
Right.
It was its own adventure. So, and I think somebody else had mentioned this. Matthews, it might have been you. It might have been Mike, or it might have been somebody else who'd mentioned that it kind of made almost its own genres of games for the handheld market, because you, again, kind of like going from the arcade to the console made different experiences and more story-driven experiences. So too that going from a console to a handheld, you couldn't approach it the same way. So you really did have to kind of figure out how you want to do these things and how you want to approach the game in a new way, which made for some really unique and interesting experiences, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it was actually Panda that was talking about that, because
it might have been. Yeah, I think it was.
Like, just because your Game Boy can do the same type of games and reproduce almost the exact same experience as like the NES, it just comes down to is you're going to be playing this game in a car. You're going to be playing this game on the bus. You're going to be playing this game while waiting for the train. You don't have the kind of time to put into the same kind of games as you put on the console. So that they just had the good ones anyway, had to find a way to be fun and fulfilling, but also fit into, especially before they started doing saves and stuff fit into the small amount of time that you have throughout the day.
Right.
Any amount of time you have throughout the day. Whereas you can come home and you could just devote your evening to just sitting in front of the TV playing Nintendo. You didn't always have that luxury of time if you're whipping out the Game Boy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, some of them did have saves, right? I think Zelda could save onto the cart. Couldn't it? Even on the Game Boy.
Yeah, the Game Boy saved. I mean, the Zelda saved. And there's I'm trying to think. I'm sure there are plenty of
Metroid 2 had a battery save. Pokemon, of course.
Probably any of the bigger
stuff like Mega Man and all that stuck with the passcode like they'd done in the past.
Yes.
It'd be a much simpler passcode, I would imagine.
All the Game Boy games
that
would have
screen
actually
size.
saved.
Probably a grid of like 3x3 as opposed to like the 4x4 grid that you would have on the NES, just because of real estate, I would think.
You mean the Mega Man passwords?
Yeah, on like Game Boy.
They're still huge.
They were what?
They're still huge. Like you
Were
still be
they?
looking at like a 5 or 6x6 grid.
Oh no! On that small screen. Oh my goodness! It's a good thing we were young and had good eyes.
Yeah, it also took up the entire screen, so it utilized the screen well enough.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I know sometimes they didn't scale the sprites quite right, because I remember one of your complaints in some of your Mega Man videos was they didn't really seem to scale Mega Man appropriately onto the screen in order for the games to function the way that you would want them to function on a handheld. And you lost a lot of screen real estate. And I noticed the similar thing on the Genesis, quite frankly, because they really like to use big sprites, right? And so you lose a lot of screen real estate scaling things around that size of character. So it's kind of a common problem from Game Boy forward, honestly, until you hit like 32-bit. And then they started learning how to kind of scale things more appropriately for the most part.
Yeah, it's like, again, it's just the struggles that developers would have had to wrap their heads around. And it's not just that the Game Boy screen can only display, half as many pixels as the NES or the television screen, basically. But it's also like you need to compensate for the fact that you're staring at a little tiny screen like that big. So you actually have to make characters extra big. You actually have to make in the case of the Game Boy Advance, you have to make the colors garish and disgusting so they would stand out. So they work fine-ish when you're actually playing it on the system itself, but once you actually start doing crazy stuff like playing these things on TV, then you actually start seeing how out of place some of these sprites are, how out of
I can see that. And that
how gross some of the
brings
colors
us
are.
into the Super Game Boy, which was honestly kind of a really cool and ingenious idea for Nintendo, I feel like. And Josh is like the only tiger we own was the Sonic Hedgehog 3. The one my sister literally dug up in the park we were playing at. That's crazy. You guys have been coming up with like some of the best stories. I haven't been putting them all up on the chat, but they've been amazing, by the way. Thank you guys so much for sharing all these.
See, everybody had a tiger. Whether you kept it was up to you. I would call that gold if I found one in the middle of nowhere.
You know what? If I found one that was partially buried, I'd probably unbury it myself and keep it.
Yeah. I mean, it'd have to go through the gaming beautician process, but I would hold on to that, especially if it was one of the more harder to find items, because believe it or not, Tiger does have some holy grails in it.
I can believe that. Almost every console has somebody who loves it, right? Like, it may only be one person, like the Virtual Boy and Panda Sub, and that's because his eyes don't work anymore. We understand.
That's probably why my eyes went to what they were and they had to replace them.
The family's first Game Boy was one we found on a puddle at a track. Still worked. We tried to return it to the previous owners and they said we could keep it. I love this, man. These things are like the Nokia phones. Like, they won't die. Like, archaeologists are going to be digging these things up like 40 years from now and going, what the hell are these things?
What is
and it'll
this
be a Tiger
Spider-Man
Electronics
thing?
and Game Boy Renaissance.
Hey, we were headed there with these re-releases. If they had continued to re-release the ones that I know collectors would have wanted, they probably would have had a successful side hustle. Because nowadays you have to look for the original models.
Yeah, and we were talking about that too with some of the Game & Watch ones that they re-released, right? Mm-hmm. That they had an opportunity to do one for Metroid not that long ago. It was like a year or two ago for the 25th anniversary of Metroid. And they didn't do anything for it. They did one for Zelda. They did one for Mario. And I felt like both of those sold pretty well. The Mario one especially sold very well. That's what got them to do the Zelda one in the first place. And then I know the Zelda one kind of dipped off a little bit, but I thought it still sold pretty well. But they never did approach that market again, which I thought was just kind of like leaving money on the table. You know, doing a short limited run of those. People are going to pick those up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's Nintendo's thing, is leaving the money on the table.
It is. In some ways, they're brilliant because they'll re-release the Switch in like 80 million different colors, and then the console that you think is now dying now surges in popularity because everybody goes up and buys the new console, right? They buy the new color, and then they'll do the same thing with their other handhelds. Like they did it with the DS, and when they remastered the DS into the DS Lite, and then into the XL, and then the new DS Pro or whatever it was. Like 4 different revisions of that, right? And then they'll do stupid stuff like with the Game & Watch stuff. Just throw money on the table and just walk away from it, right? For no apparent purpose. But it made no sense to me whatsoever, right? How many of you guys actually messed with the Game Boy Advance too much? Because I kind of want to... okay, because I'd love to hear more about this one because it's one I missed. And like I was saying earlier, I'm always constantly kicking myself that I missed this one. So make me feel even worse about how bad I missed.
Well, I sat out on the Game Boy Color that was a kid system to me. So I didn't really get into it. Plus, I didn't really see how it was different. At that time, I didn't see how it was different from the original Game Boy.
I think I had the similar confusion. Like it was the same thing, just in color, and I didn't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Plus, it was like then seen as just like the Pokemon machine. So,
right.
And I was, too old and too cool for Pokemon at the time, so I sat the whole thing out. I was excited for the Game Boy Advance, and we followed that because it was, I think it was around the same time that they were generating buzz for the GameCube too, I believe. I just kind of have this blur of memories of Metroid Prime, Game Boy Advance, Super Mario Advance.
Yeah.
So I was eagerly anticipating the Game Boy Advance coming out, and I bought it at launch. And the game I first bought was F-Zero and Mario Advance 2.
I forgot there was an F-Zero on that. I bet you that looked amazing.
It was pretty good.
F-Zero looked great on that little console.
My favorite game of the launch games ended up being Circle of the Moon. That's not the one I bought first for some reason. So.
Okay, yeah. Because there were a couple of the Metroidvania style ones on there. Circle of the Moon and oh god, there was at least 2 others I think on
Harmony of Distance and Area of Sorrow.
That's it. Yeah, because those are all on the Advance collection. Mm-hmm. That dropped, which the name implies, obviously, because everything had Advance on it when it released on there, kind of like everything had Super for the Super Nintendo.
And then everything had DS, or everything had 64 attached to it.
Right, for the N64, right. And then they kind of stopped that around like the GameCube.
Yeah, they had to have thought, how can we work Cube in?
How can we work GameCube in there?
And someone just said,
the same way.
Yeah.
They really wanted to do it.
They brought it back for Wii and Wii U.
Yeah. It absolutely did.
There have been some talk.
That's a whole other conversation about consoles, and I feel like that's another one we should probably do is consoles that were named so poorly that they actually hurt the company. Because like the Wii to the Wii U was one, the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color was another one, right? Because that just confused people on what they really were as a product, right?
Tiger Gamecom,
yes. All sorts of stuff like that. We could go on and on and on about stuff like that, I feel like. And I would happily do that.
Yeah, you're gonna find that most of that list of
oh god, freaking okay, there it goes. OBS disconnected and reconnected on me. Sorry, they came in and saw a big disconnect. That's my apologies. Sounds like the Game Boy of Color. Okay. So let's take a step back and kind of organize here because there's a lot of handhelds. I doubt we're going to be able to cover them all tonight. We could probably do 2 or 3 episodes on this. Do you guys want to go into like obscure ones that you played, or do you want to go like Nomad and Turbo Express and ones like that? Like, where do you guys want to go in here, or do you want to focus on the Game Boy Advance a little bit more?
Well, while we're hovering on the Game Boy, did any of you guys have any friends that had like the Atari Lynx or the Game Gear at the time?
I had the Game Gear. I didn't have the Lynx. I was never an Atari fan, so the Lynx was never really a strong appeal for me, and its games library didn't appeal to me as a result for similar reasons, right? So I never really dipped my toe into that one.
I had one friend that had a Lynx. He brought it to school and it was cool.
That's more than one person I knew.
I feel the same way. Now, I know people now that had the Lynx and loved it.
Yeah.
Right? That was their handheld of choice. They adored that thing. They liked it better than the Game Gear. I don't quite understand that because looking at the library of what I've seen out of the Lynx, I don't think it's as strong as the other handhelds personally. But, you know, taste is an individual thing. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into.
I grew up with Game Gear and Game Boy, just like I did NES and Master System. So eventually I got one. I saw the Lynx advertised in a gaming magazine, and my uncle and I were like, do we really want to drop that much money on this thing? Because it looks ugly. And the games that they were offering were not that impressive, despite how much I like California Games, the pack-in title.
Right.
We saw that at my mom's Dillard's when she was working there, and they had a dedicated electronics department with all the Nintendo, all the Sega stuff, and a small little section that had things nobody knew about. So we actually got to see this thing, and damn, that thing was heavy.
The Lynx looked like a beast, dude. Man, yeah. But the nice thing about it is it was kind of ambidextrous, right?
Yes,
you could hold it any way you wanted to, and you could still play it. So, like, lefties weren't at a major disadvantage from right-handed people, it seemed like, by the design. Which I thought, in retrospect, I think is great for, like, accessibility, right? For people being able to play it.
Yeah, and you could link up to, like, what, 8 consoles? Like, how many people you knew had them?
I don't know. I think they were really overly swinging for the fences on that. Kind of like the Game Boy Advance was actually being advertised in like Playboy and stuff like that for some reason. I have no idea why they had like Playboy models running around like Game Boy Advances around that time, but like Nintendo was trying to shed their like kiddie reputation for a moment and try to look adult while they not only had this really brightly funny colored handheld in the Game Boy Advance with that iconic purple color that we all now love but seemed kind of silly at the time, and their lunchbox looking console known as the GameCube that it linked to, which we all thought was kind of silly at the time, but now we adore the thing because it's a phenomenal console. But it just, and at the time where you had like PlayStation and Xbox and all these coming out, it seemed like a weird design choice and weird marketing choices.
Yep, it's true. I may have seen those at my mom's store on occasion. I would see one on the shelf collecting dust at KB Toys. Babbage's was really big on trying to front those things. And again, we weren't ready to drop that much money on a console that looked like that, especially when we had many other home consoles and portables that did a way better job than what the Lynx did. And 8 freaking AA batteries, that's a monster right there.
Yeah, and the Game Gear had 6 and would only last like 2 to 4 hours.
Yeah,
And
without sound.
Yeah, Synthos 8, I had the Game Gear, and I remember the Game Gear being at least $100 to $200. And the Lynx was similarly priced. Now, when you start looking at the Nomad and you start looking at the Turbo Express, those were crazy expensive because those were more than the cost of current consoles at the time. Because consoles were coming out at around anywhere from like $189 to $200 for the.
Well, how much did they launch the Nomad for? I mean, that was
God.
like,
I want to say the Nomad was close to 300, wasn't it? Or am
I
I just throwing out a number there?
I want to say even more than that.
really?
Yeah, because I mean, it just took straight Genesis cartridges, so it was literally a Genesis on the go.
Just really a Genesis.
Yeah, I bet. I think its battery life was even worse than the Game Gear because it took the same number of batteries, if I recall.
Actually, let me see.
Battery backpack that slotted in the back.
Oh yeah, I always had that pill thing for my Game Gear all the time, man. If I wasn't using it on the go, it was plugged into the wall, and I was playing my Game Gear with that because my parents bought that, and they're like, "Well, we're not buying you like this many batteries. This thing just dies in a heartbeat." So yeah, I absolutely asked for that. And yeah, the TV tuner, that was actually, honestly, it was a really smart idea at the time. And
Yeah,
it's one of those things that like nobody would think about today, right? Because you just pull.
Okay, everyone just ignore paying the subs comment there, but down below him, someone fact checked the Nomad price. I'm not saying you're wrong, Nick, but I was, for some reason, I was thinking it was
what was it, like 100?
more of a value system, like because it was. I
Yeah,
don't know.
I'll look it
But,
up. I have never really looked it up specifically, so I don't know. And I kind of don't remember because I never owned it when I was a kid.
It was probably because they bundled it after a while, because the core system you usually could get for like $200. It wasn't until they started adding other things to it, like buy the Nomad, get this game with it, you know. So that's probably what I was thinking.
The best parole was the
And
first
also,
Tinus Hill,
Nomad,
very, very alone.
Was like the,
Okay, so I looked up the retail price, and in 1995, it was $179.99. So that would have been about the same price as maybe a little bit more than the Genesis around that time, because the Genesis had been around for a little while, and you could get those on the cheap by that point.
And you could get those bundled too.
Yes. So it was sub $200.
Okay.
By the way, whoever has those Genesis speakers, hold on to those or sell them to me.
Yeah, that's right. It had that like plug-in jack.
Mm-hmm.
It was ridiculous. There are a lot of really cool things that Sega tried to do to innovate. Their management team was like abysmal. Like, their engineering team, their development teams, what they managed to do with the console while the Nintendo had such a stranglehold was nothing short of amazing. And then their management team would let them down every single time.
Yeah, advertising for a lot of Sega early on really suffered a lot. It wasn't until the whole Genesis Does campaign that it really started to take off.
Yeah. And that's when that's why everybody started picking up the Game Gear, because they started taking direct shots at the Game Boy almost immediately. Like you saw the commercial where the guy's playing like the Game Boy and like in like black and white, and he like randomly picks up the squirrel and hits himself in the head, and everything's in color. And then all of a sudden he's got like a Game Gear, you know? And I'm like, it's just weird, bizarre ads like that caught everybody's attention, I feel like, around that time.
Atari did that too with a lot of the Atari Lynx commercials were taking shots at the Game Boy too.
I can totally see that. And it makes complete sense when you think about it, because here they are coming in with like these bigger consoles, these more power hungry consoles, but graphically they're superior to the console, and they have color, right?
Mm-hmm. They look better in commercials. They look better in magazine screenshots.
Yeah, absolutely.
You saw them.
The magazines can't show you how the games actually play or how long the system actually lasts. But they can show you that.
Got a second rate from Pixel Kittens. Thank you, Pixel. Oh my God, it's like the second rate tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Nice. Thanks, Ritter.
That's the fun thing about Rumble that I found that's different from YouTube, that I wish YouTube would adopt, that I kind of pined for on Rumble for a long time, was a raid feature, right? So you can literally take your chat and you can send them to another chat, and they can opt in or they can opt out. So when you're done for the evening, if you have somebody that you think could use some support, you can send support that way. It's something that's been on Twitch for a long time, but a lot of other platforms that started getting heavily into streaming haven't adopted it. But Rumble has, and for several months now, and it's been a great feature to have. Not only to send people to other people, smaller channels like mine, but just for everybody to kind of like introduce people to other people. I think it's a cool feature. But yeah, going back to those commercials, yeah, absolutely. They were all taking shots. And then you had the Game Boy Advance come out, which was just, it was like a 32-bit console in a handheld format. I didn't realize it was that advanced when it came out. And going back and looking at it now, I'm like,
well, it's in the name.
Yeah, it is. I wasn't paying attention to handhelds at the time. Like, I didn't get back into them until like the DS. And it was the DS Lite that I really got back into them on.
Yeah.
Because I thought the clamshell design was too clunky for me. But when they made that Lite version, that was just like perfect. I fell in love with that thing almost immediately.
The original Game Boy DS reminded me of that mini Atari computer that John Connor used to hack the bank ATM, because it was so big and
I can
heavy.
totally see that. That makes complete sense.
And I was like, I'll wait for a more condensed version. And sure as shit, I got my Lite shortly after. So
yeah, it was not a very attractive system.
No,
it really wasn't, and I don't think it had a very good backlight if it had one at all.
It didn't have.
I don't think.
It was the same screen as the original SP, basically. So I think it had like Zombie didn't just have like the front light actually, so it was not even a backlit screen.
Yeah. It wasn't until
the DS Lite was the actual backlit screen.
Yeah.
So.
And then I moved from the DS Lite to the XL, and then I eventually got the new DS. Well, then moved into the 3DS. Well, I'm sorry. It went Lite and then 3DS, and then 3DS XL, and then the new one that had the Circle Pad Pro incorporated into it. I think that's how that went. Because I don't think they made an XL version of the DS, did they? I think they just did the Lite.
Did they?
It's not been that long, but my brain's not functioning.
I think my wife has a. Was it the DSi XL?
Yes.
So is the DSi the third version of the Nintendo DS?
That
came in the XL. Yes, it had the camera.
Oh, you know what? I think I did have that one because I remember I still have a Lite sitting in there somewhere, but I never did get any advanced cartridges. I remember keeping it because it could play the advanced cartridges. The DSi version, the larger version, they removed that slot. If I recall.
Yeah, that
was on the original and it was on the Lite, but after that they removed it.
But I think that's also when they introduced the online shop to buy digital games, and some of those are pretty good. I still have. I've just transferred them over to my current.
You have to, man. Also. Like it's. They keep shutting down the stores, and that's a whole other topic that's a sore spot for me on a lot of these individual ecosystems that I'm going to try very hard to avoid tonight, even though I have a crowd that I'd love to talk about it with. But then you had all these weird outliers around the same time because you had the Nomad, you had the Lynx in play, you still had the Game Boy going strong. Like for years into that, like I think they were even selling Game Boys almost up until the Advance, weren't they?
The Game Boy, I used to know what the date that it actually got officially discontinued. I want to say 1998.
Are we talking that basic $50 bundle like the top loader NES?
I mean,
wow. Okay, I just looked this up. March of 2003.
For the Game Boy?
Yeah.
It was
officially discontinued.
Well, okay. Now, do they literally mean the Game Boy, or they include? Because I consider the Game Boy Color to be different. But
I looked up just the Game Boy itself.
Okay, but just because you do that doesn't mean that the list isn't.
That's true. That's true.
That way.
Yeah, because the Game Boy SP is officially the last.
Yes, I mean it's like any kind of product that used the Game Boy name, they're calling a Game Boy.
Okay,
Even
so it might
Nintendo
be a little
themselves
bit fuzzy
sometimes.
there. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
All I know is that I think the most recent game that I have in my Game Boy collection is from 1998, and it's still an original black and white game. So that just gives you an idea of how long
Okay, so
that
Scepter's saying the
system would
original
be
Game
going.
Boy was 1998.
Yeah, 1998.
Okay.
That sounds about right.
Okay. That makes more sense than 2000. 2003 would have been an insane run. I mean, 1998 is already crazy. That's already almost like a 10-year run on a single handheld because I don't think it came out till 89.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like a
About
9-year
10 years.
run.
Yeah. Because again, you could still get the original Pokemon games on the original Game Boy. And those were
Right.
still a huge selling point.
Well, and I think those worked on the color as well, didn't they? I
Mhm.
want to say all those worked
Mhm.
on the color
Yeah.
version. You just didn't get the color options without a color cart.
Right. Which they did with the second gen.
Right. And then the Neo Geo had their own handheld, which was such a weird looking handheld because one, it was tiny. Two, it was black and white, and they eventually had a color version. But it was so basic compared to what the Neo Geo was trying to do at the time for such a luxury console. Coming out with something like that made less sense than coming out with a Nomad or Turbo Express, right? That would have made more sense. Now, I know you're not going to take that gigantic cart and stuff that into a handheld. The cart was bigger than my head. I mean, it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you could have done. I feel like you could have done more with that Neo Geo Pocket than they actually did. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Did any of you guys ever have a chance to mess with one of those?
Yeah.
Not at the time, but I bought one since then.
A friend of mine in high school had one, and he was always trying to gloat about how special it was. And I'm like, nah, I'm fine.
It
I was about to
is
say,
pretty
look,
neat.
do what?
It is pretty neat. So I just got like the little clicky little
Mhm.
multi-switch joystick.
Yeah.
It's got a pretty good Sonic game.
That's right. They did port Sonic
I don't
over there,
think it had-
didn't they? I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they totally ported Sonic over there. That was. I remember when I was looking at doing the Neo Geo video that I did, and I saw that, and I'm like, wow, what a bizarre place for Sonic to pop up on the Neo Geo console, right?
Mm.
A game that never made it to the arcade, had nothing to do with SNK at all, somehow got a license and on their pocket, on their handheld, of all places, right? But they were putting Sonic everywhere, right? Like
Yeah.
Sonic 1, Sonic 2, like Sonic 1 was on like the original master. It was on the Master System. I think even Sonic 2 got moved over there.
Well, it wasn't like a port. They just made a Sonic the Hedgehog game.
Yeah,
or
they made a
something.
Sonic the Hedgehog variant.
And some people
of it.
actually like those games more than the Genesis versions. So I think they're pretty good from what I've heard. I haven't actually played them.
I haven't messed with them. I have a weird love-hate relationship with the Master System. I love a lot of what it tried to do and a lot of the games and ideas that they tried to bring out there, but I find the controls so difficult. Having played a lot of Nintendo systems, I just feel like the polish isn't there, so I struggle to control most of the games on there.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel that way with the Genesis a lot of times too. It's just kind of like that Sega mindset like I feel like they took Sega does what Nintendo don't a little too seriously sometimes. Like you could have taken some of these ideas and made them work because they're good ideas.
Yeah. Well, to their credit, though, I will say that Genesis was doing a lot better than most gaming consoles were about bringing home the arcade ports.
They were, because that was their primary focus, and they still tried to do that with a lot of the Game Gear offerings. They tried to bring as many of those arcade experiences to as many other platforms as they could, right?
Mhm.
So you'd have Master System copies of stuff like Afterburner, right? I'm pretty sure there was probably a Game Gear version of Afterburner. I just never picked it up because I was never a big Afterburner guy. But like you'd see a bunch of those, like Outrun and Road Rash, and all those pop up on like multiple consoles. Me crapping on Genesis controls? No. Hey, the one I played on Sunday was fun. They actually had jump be a button instead of up, or using up in conjunction with the button in order to do some sort of weird lame jump. So they got something right, but then that was Sunsoft, and I expect them around that time to get things correct, and they did.
Maybe if we badmouth Sega enough, Mike will pop in.
He's
Like
probably cursing
Beetlejuice.
me in his sleep right now. He probably fell asleep with the stream here, and he's like, "Damn it, those guys are bad talking Sega."
He's stewing.
Did not play Batman Returns. I played the first Batman game, the one based off the '89 movie on Genesis on Sunday. That's the one I messed with. OBS Studio.
Yeah, Batman Returns on the Genesis though is not good.
What was that, Matthews?
Yeah, Batman Returns on the Genesis was not good.
I don't think anybody, even Genesis fans, heavy Genesis fans, I should say, speak super highly of that. There. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of stuff to love on Sega consoles. There's a bunch of good stuff on the Master System that I need to dig more into. The original Phantasy Star, the Golden Axe RPG game, the Zelda styled game, and there's a couple others on there I really want to play that I haven't gotten to. There's a bunch of stuff on the Genesis. There were a bunch of good RPGs on the Genesis, but
Shining Force.
But they had some missteps. When they misstepped, it was bad. Sega of America kept foobarring themselves all the way until the end with the Dreamcast. They absolutely did. And I'll stand on that. I've had people come in here and like give me crap on my channel for blatantly calling out their mismanagement. Neo Geo Pocket was compelling in terms of ability for the Game Boy Color, but it suffered in sales. It absolutely did. Matter of fact, the Neo Geo Pocket, at least the one in the States, I think only had like a year to maybe 2 year run total.
Yeah.
At most, and then it was gone. And I don't think most people ever even saw one out in the wild. Like, I don't remember seeing one at the time.
It was a niche console. I maybe knew 2 people ever who actually owned one at launch, and I didn't know a single person who owned the Wonder Swan, even though I know what it was. I never saw one in stores, and I didn't know anybody who had it.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way with the Turbo Express. It was one of those, like, I knew one store in town that carried it, and maybe Toys R Us carried it, but those were like the only 2 places I knew that even carried it. Like, it wasn't in any of the major retailers that were out in the more of the sticks areas where I normally was, because that's where I grew up. It wasn't until I got into town, and I stress town, larger than
the Wonder Swan.
You
actually made it. The Wonder Swan wasn't even in the United States though, right?
That's what Scepter's saying.
Yeah.
I don't even remember hearing about the Wonder Swan at all.
You could get it, but as I mentioned in there, you had to import it, and being what it was at the time, it's not like you can do that as easily as you could today. I think one gaming magazine I even read mentioned how you can do that, and I'm like, no, I'm not about to risk that.
Yeah, I can see that. And yeah, importing back in the day was kind of ridiculous, and Panda's like, Sega mismanaged their way into exiting console space. Who would argue that? Silly geese, that's who. I'll be honest. Anytime you run into any console, you're going to have people that will see no wrong in what their company did, right? Like, I'm a huge Nintendo fanboy, and I'll be the first to tell you, Nintendo was terrible from like the 80s to the 90s until they started getting their teeth kicked in by Sony and had to like rethink how they approached business and come up with new ideas. And they had some hits and they had some misses, right? Most people would call the Wii and the Wii U a miss. I had games that I found to be a great deal of fun on both of those. The Virtual Boy, I personally call a miss. Panda loves that console, right? So everybody's got their thing. It's kind of like with these handhelds. Like, I bet you anything, as much as we're saying the Neo Geo Pocket's not that big of a thing, there's probably a guy there that has like every single cart for like the Game Boy Pocket or the Neo Geo Pocket, and he freaking adores that thing from one end down the other and carries it everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you like fighting games, I mean, the Neo Geo Pocket was not a bad system at all. It just
but the Neo Geo itself was a huge fighting game console.
Yeah.
It was
So
basically an
most of the
arcade
games
in
on
your
the
home.
most of the games on the Neo Geo Pocket were little fighting games, and
Right.
I'm not into fighting games, but I've heard they're pretty good
Yeah,
for what they are.
and I
The
would
only game I've
expect them
actually
to be
played
good.
is Sonic. Yeah, I would expect them to be good too. I
For
mean,
my
Neo
ferocious
Geo is
adult
pretty.
language.
Now, to Panda's credit, I will back some Virtual Boy games. I think there are some on there that grasped the concept of the console, compared to
Like
other
Turbo
ones that
Boxer.
just yeah, for sure. That's probably my most favorite game on there.
See, I never dug into those because I played when I was working at Walmart. We had one on display, and
Yeah,
I
my
played it one or
eyesight,
two
but I loved it.
times, and my eyes literally hurt every time I played it. So I was just like, I can't with this console, right? Literally, I couldn't play it. It made my eyes hurt. So I just skipped that one entirely.
And you know what kills me the most about that is that was Gunpei's last commitment to Nintendo before he passed. He couldn't have died on something better.
Well, I know he
I think
actually
it was
retired
their
after that
fault.
because I think it was kind of one of those like shame on me for having released this, and he had so many. That's what I feel like it was, and
No,
it
he got
sucks.
shamed out of it by Nintendo.
But that's Japanese culture. So I mean, it's like if there's a failure with your name on it, whether you're to blame for that or not, shame. So
Yeah.
he, but it was like I don't believe he was ready to release it, but Nintendo was. So they basically just like put his prototype to market, and it just didn't turn out very well. Now, if he'd had maybe another half a year to develop it further, then who knows what we would have gotten.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Genius, so.
To his
and
yeah,
the way
you bring
I
that
played
up.
it wasn't the way it's ideally meant to be played anyway, because the display unit had the controller locked in one position, so you're already kind of stooped over this thing with the controller in an awkward position, right? Because you can't move it around because it's a display unit. It's not really meant for you just to be able to move the controller around everywhere. It was locked down. So it wasn't the best impression, but the eye strain alone was enough to make me kind of nervous about getting heavier into it. And Josh said the same thing. One of the single bad choice was to basically have red be the primary color. And there was a logical reason behind that, because the contrast of red on black would make things much easier to see. It was one of those primary colors. Like, you also could have done green, which I think would have been a little bit less painful, but then I don't think but they also tried to color the console after the color they were using for it, and I don't think a green Virtual Boy would have popped as nicely as the red one they were released physically as far as the unit goes. So I kind of see why they did what they did. It wasn't compatible for me, right?
Or most people.
You mean glorious. And while you guys are like, oh no, they're off topic.
Yeah.
Well, technically, the Virtual Boy is sort of a
portable.
handheld or portable console, right? You don't have to be attached to a TV.
Yeah.
It's just on its own little stands. Now the commercials.
I don't know if they really knew what it was.
I don't know if they knew what it was.
Yeah, because
The
I think
commercials
Nintendo
were
was like,
terrifying.
he made this. What do you think about it?
well, again, what was considered 3D at the time? You had head mounts for the Sega Genesis that was like, oh, 3D graphics in your face. No, you're shoving too many screens into my eyeballs. It's not a 3D unit. Nintendo was also trying to push something that, I think they didn't understand what it meant to be in 3D. Was it supposed to be fully immersive and whatnot? Because when they chose to go with stereoscopic display, all that really does is just add depth. It's not necessarily 3D. Now, some games come close, like Tailrow Boxer, but it's still not fully as 3D or virtual as the console tried to sell itself as.
Yeah. I don't know. I found that perspective, at least from the 3DS perspective, that stereoscopic, really good in the right game. I thought the Lego games were quite good in that stereoscopic 3D. I thought the Mario Land games benefited greatly from that sense of depth that you got from the stereoscopic, even though it's not true 3D, right?
Right.
I thought it added something to the gaming experience that wouldn't necessarily have worked otherwise. And so I was a big proponent of being one of the few people that would often leave the 3D on DS. I mean, it was unpopular enough that they got a 2DS release, which I thought the form factor on that was awful.
Yeah. I mean, they did harness the technology eventually and did make it better. But at that time, I don't think they either fully understood what they could do with it or maybe didn't think thoroughly enough on how to approach it, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It feels like it was a little bit underbaked when it got pushed out the door, and I don't know if there was pressure because they needed a new product, and this is what he'd been working on, and they're like, no, 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 this is kitschy new enough that this will work as is. Let's go ahead and get it out the door. Because some of Gunpei's projects took a really, really long time, right? Because like Super Metroid took like ages to come out. You know, the original Metroid was brilliant for its time, but had a big crunch time on it. The Game Boy was outstanding, right? So he'd had a long tenure. So I think they were just expecting because it had his touch on it, it didn't matter if he was fully done with it or not. It would work anyway. And I think that might have been a bit of a misstep.
Also, I want to think that because he was head of that project, that because R&D3 was working on the N64, maybe he felt like the pressure of competition, you know? Like maybe there was something there.
Just comment turning the 3D off on the 3DS. It's like going on a date with Pam Anderson for her thoughts on algebra.
To her credit, I hear she's actually very intelligent.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot more to her than meets the eye.
At least from what I'm told to have met her.
Virtual Boy Craig eventually left Nintendo and made a new company called Koto. And then he led the development of Bandai WonderSwan handheld gaming console. Okay, that I didn't know. I didn't know Gunpei did that. It's missing the point.
Now, again, because we're talking about Virtual Boy, we got to bring you back to Tiger's attempt at the Virtual Boy, the R Zone.
That's right. I was drawing a blank on the name, but I knew they had that. That was such a weird device because it was kind of like the one LCD screen on the band thing that was on your head, right?
Yes, until they made an actual portable, like handheld unit, which really wasn't much.
Yeah, that whole thing was like it looked like Tiger had looked at Konami's laser scope thing and went, that we want that playing our games. And everybody went, but why?
Well, when you couldn't afford the price point on the Virtual Boy, what's your next best option? Go for the cheap Tiger
a
dollar
Game
store
Boy,
knockoff.
anything? I don't know. Any other console?
I'm disappointed that is one of the consoles I did not keep in my Tiger collection because, again, I appreciate it as a relic of its time, but in no way would I support that device. Virtual Boy has my 100% campaign donation versus the R Zone because, my gosh, I know Tiger for what it was, and I applaud it for what he was trying to do, but they really should have never sold that one.
Yeah, well, just the concept of it, of walking around with that thing on your head, it's just like this surreal experience, right? I mean, okay, it's kind of like and we're gonna go Tiger again. It's like the Tiger watches, the Tiger handheld watches. It was kind of like, nothing says like uber geek than having one of these things on your wrist and that thing on your head. It's kind of the badge, like, I am the Tiger guy,
I had the watches. I still do.
I love it.
Dude, in junior high, I would have, or elementary school, I would have loved those little watches.
During assemblies, they were time savers. I'm telling you. Even girls had them because there were pink versions of Super Mario 3 and Zelda watches that some girls had. And we used to take them off and swap them around and be like, here, let me play yours. Just don't let me get caught playing with something pink. you know? So again, Tiger had it nailed when it came to the same concept of how do we kill time for a little bit, like the Game Boy, being the cheaper alternative.
Right.
But yes, I will admit there were some times you were kind of embarrassed to admit you had it. I took it with a grain of salt because I knew what I was getting into, and
Right.
nobody's going to take that away from me. I love my Bo Jackson Tiger handheld. Uh, but it's just amazing how, again, Tiger followed suit with everything Nintendo was doing. And it's really sad to bring up how, despite how terrible the R Zone was, it outlived the Neo Geo Pocket.
And I think that has a couple things to do. One, the Neo Geo Pocket had a couple of versions. They had the black and white and they had the color. So that's increased dev costs. And then trying to get over to the States, what's already known as a niche console. And then you have this thing. So I feel like our zone hit that butter zone of everybody knew Tiger over here. They knew it as a cost effective option. So it was kind of one of those things that's like, well, why not? You know what I mean? As opposed to Neo Geo that was already kind of like niche and wasn't originally intended to be sold but rented anyway. So I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe it's just one of those things, like a name recognition thing. But even Panda's like saying the R zone's like having sex with a midget. It's inferior, but still exotic and exciting.
It's those one things you can talk about or brag about, but just that one time.
That's right.
And I'm still
More to Pam
convinced.
Anderson than meets the eye. There's already a whole lot more than meets the eye. Yes, there is.
I'm still
Tiger brought
convinced.
the mold and went with it and said, fuck it, use it. Tiger bought the mold and said, fuck it.
I'm still convinced to this day that the lead character in the movie Hackers is wearing one, but they have sprayed over Tiger R Zone because even they didn't want to be seen showcasing that horrid device.
And Hemisphere asked if we're going to talk about Tamagotchis. Now, I never dug deep into Tamagotchis.
I did.
The most I got into it was like the VMU stuff on the Dreamcast, right? Which is technically kind of a handheld, but also a memory card.
Yeah. I could take the reins a little bit about Tamagotchi.
If you want to dig into Tamagotchi, I mean, Matthews is zoning out on Tamagotchi. I can tell already.
Yeah, I wasn't into Tamagotchi.
You're into the zone where he's like, I'm finding it amusing to hear you talk about it, but I'm not down for these.
Well, I aim to please no matter how nerdy I am. Yes, Gigapets, Tamagotchis, $5 knockoff, Chinese knockoff Gigapets, wherever you saw them. Totally was a hype for a lot of years. Again, one of Tiger's little innovations or ripoffs that I'm surprised took off as well as it did. But again, you're talking about a little device that's going to kill time for a short amount of time, easy to conceal, which you could mess around with in class. God knows I did. Sorry, I did not dig seventh grade biology. Uh, and like the Tigers, small price point had variety to them. So kids had Gigapets and Gigapets and other knockoffs. Nanos was another one of
Yeah.
whatever the hell they wanted. Dogs, cats, fish, dinosaurs. Nano released the human baby Gigapet if you wanted to know what it's like to raise a child in sixth grade.
Sounds like a terrible idea.
Nano introduced the talking line, which got banned because some early models had profanity in them. So Tiger's Gigapets offered that same cheap price point and flexibility. You could collect them all, and I still have a majority of my Gigapets. How do I put this? I used to make a business off of my Gigapets.
Wait, what?
I would come to
Explain.
school with
Yeah, I
a
was about to
bunch
say,
of
please
them.
elaborate.
I would come to school with at least 10, maybe 15 of them, just, strapped to my belt. And I used to rent them. I used to rent them out to kids, $2 a day. And so they'd be like, all right, which one do you want? I have these left. And they would give me $2. They'd take the Gigapet for the day. And at the end of the day, they had to give it back to me. I said, if you keep it overnight, That's another dollar, but I want it first thing in the morning. So I had these as a side hustle while I was collecting them.
I feel like Luke Skywalker meeting Yoda for the first time. I have so much to learn.
Oh, don't you will.
Learn ways of
Crazy.
Tamagotchi, you will. Yes.
I have. Now, Tamagotchis were in the same vein, of course, but the one thing that sold Tamagotchis is you could, based on how you interacted with it, you could end up with a different creature every time. So they had playability. Um, and that line spanned the Digimon line, which was now you can have monsters and based off the anime show.
Zombie pimping out Gigapets. Dude, the comments are great in here. Like, Panda's talking about my glorious beard. And how I just need a Tamagotchi. I just need a Tiger Watch to make me, like, irresistible to women. Josh is talking about, and he's not wrong. The Tamagotchi are kind of still going strong. They actually started re-releasing some of those more recently because they've kind of become like, it's kind of become a nostalgia thing, right? Like everything else from a lot of our childhood, it's kind of come back around again because we're all still in the market. We're all kind of into that nostalgic thing. And a lot of the younger generations are seeing some of these things and going, wow, that's really neat. Like I was talking about when I went to see the Transformers thing, you're seeing younger kids show up in there, which seemed bizarre to me, but they seemed into it, as much into it, if not more so, than like a lot of the adults that were there. So it's this weird, bizarre time in the world.
Yeah, and that's why I have to give Tiger and all those early innovations their due credit, because whether we saw them as terrible even back then or we only see them as terrible now, there is something nostalgic about a lot of those early games and consoles. There really is. And the fact that people are paying top dollar for some of these things, even now, when back then you wouldn't even pay $20 for a Tamagotchi or a Tiger handheld, especially if you were much older by then. You're not going to be
I think those things around the time, they were anywhere between what, $10 to $15 a piece? Just for the...
Depending.
Yeah. So they weren't ultra expensive. I remember them being on like end caps and everything. And I'll admit, if you were to throw like a Mega Man 2, Tiger handheld, or the Simon's Quest one and put it in front of me, I'd play a few rounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not proud. I'd boot up and play a few rounds. It might not keep my attention but as much as it did when I was a kid, but I'd at least play it.
Yeah. There's just something nostalgic about it, even if it's a piece of crap. There really is. I think it's more so that it's etched in our history now.
Carla.
Hey, Carla, good to see you. I love the fact that you were trying to avoid the term pimping.
I really was. Animal trafficking. I was trying to avoid all those horrible terms. I mean,
I already made a correlation to you being the original Tiger King.
I called Pokemon glorified cockfighting, so I.
Well, you're not wrong.
I tried to avoid that, but yes, that's exactly what it was. And truth be told, the money I made off that's how I bought most of my games and consoles later. So, hey,
Hey, whatever puts money in the bank, or your piggy bank, or whatever you call it at the time. Now, to kind of move forward a little bit, because are there any other... actually, before I do that and jump to where we think things are going, and talk about that for a little bit, are there any of the handheld consoles that we missed that you guys want to cover? Matthews, you've been quiet for a while, so is there anyone that you wanted to cover or talk about that we haven't covered enough that you wanted to get
We
to?
didn't talk about the game.com. Why?
Okay, take that away, because I never had that.
I did.
I
still do.
I don't think that
I know Zombie had it. Zombie had all of these.
I wanted the game.com when I started collecting all the handheld systems later on. I wasn't aware of it at the time. We did.
Yes.
We did discuss a little bit.
Yeah, we did touch on it a bit. Yes.
I was very naive about wanting the Gamecom myself. True story. The year it came out, I asked for that for Christmas and didn't get it. So I was really vengeful about it. And then I saved up to get a brand new console, a power adapter, 3 sealed games, all from KB's for under $50. And I wanted to break that damn thing the second I played one of the games I wanted the most on it.
Now,
I
wasn't that
was
the one that
living
you
my
had to
cow.
open the case and pull out the battery to change the game out on? Or is that a different console?
It has a similar design to that.
Wouldn't that be the
That was the N-Gage, I think.
that was the
Mhm.
Engage, the phone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a terrible design choice.
The game port
The
and the
top one?
battery compartments were spaced out until they condensed it for the Gamecom Model 2, which was the size of a Neo Geo Pocket.
Gotcha. I mean,
But
that's not a bad form factor. I feel like it's a little too small, right? Like I always thought the SP was a little too small, and I know people who loved it. I just thought it was a little too tiny for my particular handheld desires. But then I have ridiculously sized handhelds between the Switch and the Steam Deck and stuff like that now too. I feel like those have gotten almost too big in later years. I feel like the stuff around the Game Boy and the DS kind of nailed that form factor, right? As far as like viewable space and compactness that you want out of a handheld.
right, and the Gamecom didn't offer a lot of real portability until they condensed it. Because the original model is a thin console, but it's still kind of bulky.
Right.
It's roughly the size of a Game Gear, but thinner. And of
Yeah.
course, didn't have that wonderful color display. We're still back to
You
black and white.
black and white.
Yeah.
I don't
And
think it was dot
although,
matrix at that time, was it? It was just a black and white screen.
yeah, I don't think they made that push until later games came out because for what it was, again, Tiger trying to be ambitious and bring like Duke Nukem and Resident Evil 2 to their console.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure that's what you really want to try to do? Now, unfortunately, because I'm an RE fanboy, that was the reason why I wanted to buy it again.
Oh, that was not a that. My understanding is that's not a good version of RE.
It's not.
That's what I've heard too.
It really isn't.
What was that, Matthews?
So that's what I've heard too.
Yeah, I've seen some stills and a little bit of video on it, and it's sort of painful. It's I mean, okay, RE is already a little clunky because of tank controls, but this made it like bad is my understanding.
Try playing Resident Evil 2 or Duke Nukem on a TI-83 Plus. That's what you're gonna get.
Ouch.
And I had Super Punch Out on my TI-83 that worked really well. So, yeah. Again, the ambition's there, but it's not delivering on everything it's advertising. It
Yeah.
did bring to life the touchscreen capability, but we also had Palm Pilots that could do that. It mentioned, oh, you can go on the internet with this in small print, text-based only. And you had to buy the special adapter and a special modem for the Gamecom to do that. But if you already have a home computer, why even bother?
I mean, because it's the Gamecom, and it's the Gamecom. I mean, he screamed Gamecom. I mean, they literally stole like a page out of Sega's playbook around that time because that was out around the same time as like the Genesis and all that. And so Sega's screaming Sega, they're screaming Gamecom in like every commercial. It was just like a blatant ripoff of the same ad campaign trying to get some pop.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, when you've got the biggest names in gaming history by then, well established with new competitors coming into the scene, nobody's going to pay attention to this dated technology anymore.
Yeah. I knew it, and then the Nokia N-Gage. The Nokia N-Gage looked more interesting to me because it was like a phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the phone. You could text with it. You could play games on it. So from a design perspective, that seemed more interesting. But I wasn't into handheld gaming. If I was, I wasn't gonna. I would have picked up like a Game Boy Advance, or or the Nomad, or it had probably not the Turbo Graphics Express, because I didn't really know anything about Turbo Graphics at that point other than it existed, right? So I wasn't really into its library, so that wasn't like a big draw to me, and it wasn't explained well to me why it was $300 anyway. So I didn't understand. It was kind of like you just take the card and you put it in, and it's the same game. Like there's no difference. I'm like, well, that would have made that a lot more appealing had you explained it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sad because with the Gamecom, I almost felt like Tiger went backwards in capability because it was harder to see images on that than a Tiger handheld game. Even if you tweak the brightness and um, the sharpness on the console, it was really tough to see that at times.
Yeah,
And they
it's
were
almost like
trying
they
to,
wanted to use the Game Boy screen, but try to do a more
yeah,
modern game console. And it was a huge step backwards because even Nintendo by this point was like, no, we've gone way past this.
it's true. And they were trying to do what Neo Geo was doing with the Pocket, where they were trying to release fighting games. There's a Sega there's a Sonic game on there, Sonic Jam, I believe, which is basically Sonic 3D Blast on a monochrome screen. They had a lot of licensees that they were trying to bring in, and just a lot of them were backing out because they're like, this console's terrible.
Yeah. And I imagine it was probably hard to develop for, too, because it was probably highly proprietary. So getting anything moved over to it was probably a pain.
Yeah, the backlight feature could have helped it, but
yes,
not by much.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, no, it was just one of those weird, bizarre instances.
It was a glorified Gigapet. That's what I'll say.
Yeah,
and even then, you
yeah,
can see
it
Gigapets.
was. I can go with that. That makes total sense. Now we fast forward through the 3DS, because I think most of us had the 3DS, and I had a lot of good experiences with that, and I still have most of my games on that, and I still have several of the consoles floating around the house, and had a lot of fun with that console. That was probably the last really innovative handheld I can think of, and now they've kind of like synergized into consoles, like just straight up consoles or accessories to consoles, because you've got the PlayStation Portal, which only works with the PlayStation 5 and needs like a Wi-Fi connection or internet connection. You got the Steam Deck, which is basically a console accessory. You've got the Switch, which is a full-on hybrid console. I'm just going to call it a hybrid, which that's really where I feel like the Wii and the Wii U got us, was to the Switch, right? Because the Wii was a good step towards legitimizing, to an extent, motion controls on a console basis, not on like a VR console basis, but on like a regular console. And then the Wii U was the tablet extension to that nobody understood. And both those things kind of got us to where the Switch is today, right? I feel like that was just kind of like a natural evolution of Nintendo kicking around the idea of getting people used to the idea of a console that you could use both ways, and kind of paying attention to their market, and then really hitting the nail on the head when they got the Switch out, to be able to hit that in a form factor that was not only large enough for you to be able to see what's going on and play more advanced games, but small enough that you could still kind of carry it with you, right?
So I think that we're pretty much done with handhelds now. That's the sad thing. Like I love handheld systems, but I think that when Nintendo came out the Switch, I think that was like the death knell for a traditional handheld system as a major pillar of a video game company's output. Because Nintendo was the one that was like holding it up for the most part.
Yeah.
Sony tried a couple times, and they couldn't hack at all. So
yeah, I mean, we kind of glossed over the Vita and the PSP, which were really good in their own right.
They were really good systems, but unfortunately, they did not have the backing of a really good company to support them. So
I don't think Sony. I think if it had taken off like gangbusters, Sony would have supported it better. But I think the first attempt was interesting for them. So they did the Vita, thinking, well, we'll shore up some of the problems and some of the feedback we've gotten on the PSP, and we'll make the Vita, and we'll try this one more time. And then when the Vita didn't immediately just bury Nintendo, I think they just decided to pull out of the market until they came up with this Portal thing, which seems like a half-hearted attempt at best in handheld gaming. Like the form factor's kind of awkward. The way it functions is basically it's not an independent console in any way. And you're right. I feel like the Switch pretty much put like the last nail in the coffin. If it wasn't that, it was mobile phones in general, right? Because the handheld market was starting to kind of dip away anyway because everybody has a cell phone, and so they're just playing games on their cell phone rather than carrying a dedicated handheld. So the Switch tried to take a different direction of leaning into one of their traditional strengths, which has always been their handheld market, and make a console based around being that kind of mixed model and put the last nail in the proverbial coffin of a dedicated handheld console, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because now you've got stuff like the Steam Deck, you've got the ROG Ally. There's rumors that Xbox might make one for their ecosystem, though the direction they're going, that's kind of debatable. Because right now they're kind of putting everything multi-platform, so it's hard to tell if they're even going to be doing hardware moving forward. And I feel like the Steam Deck is a good option if you're already kind of a PC enthusiast, right? Or you're curious about getting into PC, but you want something closer to like what their Steam box was, but in a more appealing form factor. Because you can still hook it up to a TV, connect controllers to it and everything, and operate it like a regular console on your TV. I take mine downstairs and do that occasionally from time to time when I don't want to be in my computer room or if I have company over, right? And there's something I have on Steam that I don't have in a console. So I just plug it in down there. The RG Ally is kind of a similar thing where they just did it on a Windows form factor and you can install any of the launchers you want to. But, I mean, are any of you guys kind of happy with that particular direction? Because you guys are even more handheld aficionados than I am, because I've dipped in and out more than you guys have, and you guys seem far more dedicated into that space. Is that something you're enjoying as an experience, or do you just not even care for those?
I'm not really enjoying it. However, as I'm getting a little older, I'm playing handheld games less and less on actual handheld systems.
Yeah.
It's just starting to get the old eyes, where it's kind of harder to focus on something that's right here. So I play a lot of handheld games, but they're just on the TV. So it's like I am resistant to the dish that Nintendo is serving up. However, clearly I have an appetite for what they're serving. I don't know. It's a reluctant acceptance to the way things are going. I just really like actually having a dedicated handheld system. I just think they're just really fascinating systems.
Yeah. Well, there's something to be said about the form factor of something along the lines of a Game Boy. I feel like the Game Boy kind of nailed the right form factor. It feels good in your hand. It's about the right size. It'll fit in your pocket. It'll fit in your backpack. You can get easy cases for it. I feel like the DS kind of nailed that to an extent too, because it's big enough to give you enough real estate when you want to use it, but it compacts enough that you can easily carry it around. The Switch kind of pushes that. You can fit it into a backpack, but I wouldn't want to put it in my back pocket or anything.
Right.
The Steam Deck's the same way. You can throw it in a backpack. It's more bulky than a Switch when it's in a backpack. And I like my Steam Deck, but I will put an asterisk next to that if you're not a PC gamer and you're not you don't have a decent Steam library, or you don't want to invest in a Steam library, then it may not be the go-to console for you. Because what you're really getting at are the things that are going to run a really long time on it is you can use it for emulation. You can run a lot of stuff that way. I do a lot of that. A lot of the indie games will run for a really, really long time on it. But if you start doing stuff that's more advanced and you try to a handheld mode, like say the latest Guilty Gear or Mortal Kombat, those will run on it, but you're going to kill the battery in like an hour to 2 hours. So it's better to take it to a location, plug it into a dock, and get it on the TV where it can charge while you're playing it, and then use it on the TV that way, right? If you want to do it that way. But again, you have to embrace that sort of PC mindset. If you're not a PC gamer, I don't feel like the Steam Deck is a good investment for you unless you want to start getting into PC gaming. Then maybe it's kind of your entry level to get your hands on them whenever you get done building whatever rig you want to build, or if you don't already have one that's already built that's capable of playing a lot of the stuff you want to launch, then you already have those titles, right? And then you can just install them on your main machine, and then when you're on the go, you can take them on the go because things are saved in the cloud, so you can kind of transport your saves back and forth that way. When things sync, they don't always sync. That's a Steam thing. That's not a Steam Deck problem thing, but that's just kind of how it functions. But I've used it that way. I've played Final Fantasy, the remastered version of Final Fantasy IV on my PC, and then stopped it. It uploaded things to the cloud. I picked up my handheld. I went to another room. I sat down, watched something on the TV while I brought it up again on that and continued my save from there. And it's been hugely cool for that and that alone. So I like it from that perspective. But to the guy's point on the panel, it kind of feels like a step back in innovation and design, because now we're getting closer to where all the experiences are the same. The experiences aren't unique. They're not tailored to that console. Left my PC till the battery expanded and the UND hinge broke. Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Those batteries just like I love the PSP, but it loses juice just by sitting there being a PSP. It's like as bad, worse than like the PS4 controller.
Yeah.
I thought the D-pad on the PSP, I had a couple of bad D-pads on there, and I did some self repairs on them, and they were still sketchy. And being someone who was into fighting games on the PSP, it was a nightmare when the D-pad didn't function because it was such an integral part. And then the UMDs, I know a couple of mine, the casing for the disc came unglued. So the protective cover that you slotted it in with was loose, and that was a nightmare. I was kind of happy when they moved to the Vita and used a normal cart. I'm not going to lie. I loved my PSP, but man, it had some issues just from a sheer design perspective.
I had actually, because
I haven't played my 3DSs in
a long time. Actually, I had two like main 3DSs that I was using. I mean, it's been maybe a year since, probably more than that, since I actually powered them on and played them. I pulled them out just to see what kind of digital games I downloaded from the 3DS eShop. Those batteries were still holding a charge after a year of just sitting in a drawer. And my PSP cannot hold a battery charge overnight. It's.
I can believe that. Again, I don't feel like Sony put the best foot forward when they made the hardware.
When it works, it's a beautiful system.
Oh, it is, and I love the touchpad on the back. I thought that was a brilliant idea. They did a lot of really cool stuff with that console. Like I loved the GUI interface for it. I thought the way you interfaced with all the games on it and everything was cool. I had tons of MP3s and stuff on it to use it as an MP3 player when I wasn't playing games on it. A bunch of people jailbroke it and did retro emulation on it. I never did that. Overall, I just thought it was a really good console. I had a ton of fun with that console. Like, you won't hear me, other than some poor design choices in the hardware, which I put up with because I just love the console, right? I mean, those are my big hang-ups on it, is mostly just physical hardware, not the software, not the design of anything else outside the D-pad and the battery. And I don't think I ever had a problem with my battery, personally, but I haven't looked at anyone to see if they have any problems now, if I can even find them.
Check it. If you can find it, I almost guarantee your batteries are like twice the size now.
They may very well be, and it may be toast. You may be absolutely correct.
I think, because I was talking to Jim about, Jim is I'm surprised that he's not here tonight, but he's a huge PSP fan, and he says that basically if you know you're not going to be playing your PSP for at least a day or two, take the battery out, because unless you're playing it every day, you're just killing the system by leaving the battery in there. So I think that no matter how you turn it off, it still seems to be drawing power somehow, and I don't know why. I feel like I'm turning the the system off the right way every single time.
Yeah.
But apparently not. 'Cause the battery always dies overnight.
I don't know. That's weird. PSP could also play movies. They had UMD movies that you could buy for it, and it would play movies on it. Absolutely. It wasn't their biggest market, but it definitely was a market. I remember seeing some of them in the stores, but I don't remember seeing them move very often. But yeah, I don't know. Are there any other thoughts you guys have on this, or directions you'd kind of like to see things go? I mean, I personally would kind of like to see Nintendo make another kind of dedicated handheld, but I don't see that happening. I wouldn't mind seeing Sega throw their head in the ring. I don't know that I want to see Xbox kind of throw in on a handheld. I don't know what that's going to bring to the party that they don't already have in some other form. I just don't think it's a good fit, personally. What do you guys think, though?
I would like to see more exclusive handheld markets within, because I guess the other thing that we didn't really touch on is that the benefit of having Nintendo having a handheld system, or Sega having a handheld system, or Sony having a handheld system, is that you'd also get exclusively handheld versions of, like, there was God of War games that were just on the PSP. There's Mario games that are just on the portable systems. I know it's probably a whole lot easier for the company just to have one set of games to worry about, but it's nice actually having. I always liked having a Mario game, a Mega Man game that was only on the Game Boy Advance. I miss those days. If there was a way for us to get back to that, which I don't think we will, because I would say that the direction of handheld gaming now is going to be going towards like the Steam Deck kind of model. I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
Everything. And it's probably going to be playing in. I feel like your today's gamers literally want the same exact games on the go as they could play on the console. They want their Fortnite and their Call of Duty. Sorry, Carla. You want Fortnite on the go, right? So, I just think that's what sells. I think that's what the kids these days want. Even the grown up kids like Mike probably want that kind of stuff now. I don't think he wants watered down portable versions of popular franchises. He wants the same game. I don't know. That's why I don't like change, though. I mean, it's like I can want to one hand and do the other thing on the other hand, and we'll see which one fills up first.
Right. Zombie, what do you think?
I think it all depends on how you view the Switch, honestly, because to some newer generations, like my son, he considers it more of a portable because that's how he chooses to play it. He has the option to hook it up to our TV. He just prefers being in his room, lying on his bed, playing his console, while I can go in my room or the living room and watch something or do something else. So I guess that's kind of how I would approach it, is what you view the Switch to be, because now that they have libraries that, not every game is there, but they're bringing along ones that fans remember, you can still play a lot of the memorable titles that we couldn't on the NES on the Switch, and same with every other emulator they bring over, SNES, N64. So ultimately, I'd like to see the return of a dedicated handheld console. I just don't think that there's going to be enough push and motivation for that. I think that would be a niche market for those of us who grew up with handhelds and respect and love the technology, but it wouldn't be like a worldwide seller, I don't think.
Yeah, I think if I were to try to bring dedicated handhelds back, I would probably do it in a slightly new way. Because one of the things that I like about the handhelds is, one, the game design had to be different, right? Because the form factor wouldn't allow for specifically what you were doing on the console. So there was something unique about that. Then when you started hitting things like the DS, you had all these different perspectives, like the book perspective and things like that you could play the games in. Or you had a touchpad or a stylus or something like that added a new dimension to the game. And one of the things that I feel like with modern gaming that's becoming a bigger problem is into a similar feeling experience. I've touched on this before with console generations, and I don't know if me and Mike did a very good job on it, but something to be said about a lot of the different generations and some of the risks that they would take there is you had different innovations that made the games play and feel different because they were on that particular platform, right? So if you could engage something like that, now Matthew's is just having fun with all the flying emojis.
I just want to see what happened. Would it do all four at once? And it did. So
oh yeah, no, it'll do all four of them. You put them in a line, it'll throw them all on the screen. It's actually kind of amazing. I love that. That's part of Social Stream Ninja. So if you guys are streaming on YouTube, you can absolutely do this on yours. This is not a Rumble thing. This just works in general. And if any of you guys have questions on it, you can find me and I can walk you through it. It was Mike that pointed it out to me at first. And it's actually really easy to set up. It's super easy to set up and it's fun. I like it. But what I would do is I would bring it back and almost use it sort of like if you were to play something on the go, you could either use it like your phone as part of the extension or the console that it could snap in or be worked in some way to be a companion to your main console when you're at home. So you could have some of that data kind of like the Wii U had or the VMU had. So you had that extra real estate to be able to see some of the information when you're using it in conjunction with your console. Kind of like how the Game Boy Advance had the link cable and you could do like crystal swords and stuff like that, where you had a lot of display data on the actual Game Boy Advance while you're looking at the screen. So you could offload some of that data. I think some of that could redeem some interest in it, at least for a newer audience, in my mind, rather than just kind of coming at it from the exact same angle. Because I think you guys are right. I don't think the modern market wants the kind of handheld experience that we grew up with, partially because I don't think they understand it. No. And partially because it always seems to be, like, if you talk to a more modern gamer, it always tends to be about the graphics, right? Like, you'll see a lot of modern gamers, they're not even into indie games because they look too retro, and they're not into that, right?
Mm-hmm. There's no appreciation.
It's a weird state of, like, hyper fidelity and everything.
Got to stop myself before I go into my old grandpa gamer mode there. But yeah, I would agree. I think that there isn't a connection to it like there was with us. Because when we had the Game Boy, when we had the Game Gear, and all these consoles that we've mentioned, like, it was groundbreaking in some aspects.
Yes.
But in many ways, it still wasn't at the peak of what home console and even what the arcade scene was still providing. So, you know, we were happy to have Mario on the go, Batman on the go, Turtles on the go. Was it the same exact game we were playing on NES? Not exactly, but later games started to really push for that to still offer a very similar experience. So, you know, we grew up with the rise of that technology, and now it's kind of just peaked. And I think only those who had that appreciation and even respect for it would be the ones wanting the dedicated handheld.
Yeah, I sadly kind of feel like it's a way. I feel like there's ways you could bring it back, but it's whether or not the market would even embrace it if you did. You know,
it'll be neat. It's like, and it kind of is coming back a little bit more, like with the Evercade. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think that the like the Steam Deck type systems, I mean, is a sign of the the handheld, the idea of a handheld gaming machine, still kind of grumbling and trying to get the motor running again.
Yeah, and honestly, I kind of go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's on me.
No, that's right. I would like to see it return to actually having like specific games made specifically for a handheld system. I just don't know if it'll ever be like that again, at least not for a while.
Yeah. But... No, and I agree with you. It'd be nice to have something that, like, okay, maybe you could play it on your console, but there's an aspect of it, like okay, take the Pocket Station as an example, right? You have your main game, but you have like this side game that gets loaded onto like the Pocket Station itself. and there's certain things you can collect there that you could transfer back to the game, right? If you could do something, and there goes OBS disconnecting and reconnecting again. So sorry for the interruption, folks. Hold on, Paste is in here just talking of a storm. There, okay. Okay, they're just talking about like Metallica being at a festival. Got it. Okay. And everybody's having fun with the emojis. I love it. I don't know. Would you guys bite on that if they did something like that, where like you had that kind of like either VMU or Pocket Station companion app that you could use on one of these handheld things? Would that pull you guys into like say a Steam Deck or an RG Ally, or hell if Xbox gets into whatever the hell it is? Would that draw you into anything like that, you think?
Mm-hmm. So I was distracted by the emojis again. I was like, look at all the moving stuff. What do you say, Nick?
I mean, I'm glad you guys are enjoying it, but you're my panel too. Tag coming. Curse you, floating emojis.
I think they brained his damage.
That's okay. That's okay. We have been talking for like 2 hours, so this is kind of a long stream to kind of get me on this. I guess we should probably wrap this up because I think everybody's kind of getting a little bit tired. What are your guys' last thoughts on this? Or you got anything coming up on your channel, or anything you're kind of looking forward to doing, or anything like that you want to cover as we kind of like wrap up the evening?
I think we did a pretty good job covering all the systems, all the major ones, even the not so major ones. So I hope we left anything out.
Yeah, it was actually nice to shed some light on this topic because, like you mentioned, a lot of people really don't talk about the handheld market, and it's weird because a lot of us grew up with these things, so it's surprising that nobody really takes an interest in it. But I think to piggyback off what was said earlier, it's just because modern gaming being what it is, you know, we're lucky that younger gamers have actually gone back to retro gaming, complaining about it way more than we do, but that's because we have the skills and they don't.
I mean,
but to be able,
you throw anybody who's like 12 or 15 now into like Ninja Gaiden or Punch Out, and they're probably gonna have a bad time. Like Glass Joe's gonna get some KOs. You know what I mean?
Right. I tell my son to this day, hey, I'll buy you whatever new Switch game you want, but you got to beat the first level of Contra without dying.
And that's going to take him a bit. It's totally doable, but it's going to take a bit.
Whereas I'm sitting here just going through the level, yawning and everything, and he's just like, how are you doing this? He was the same way with the Tiger games when he first saw those, because I bought the re-release of the X-Men one at a comic shop a week or two ago. He really wanted to play it for some reason. I said, kid, I have this huge collection that you've never looked at until now, because he's into X-Men.
Right.
And, you know, one game stemmed into the interest of Marble Madness. Now he goes through my collection every other so often, and he tries to master one whenever he can. But again, we need to be able to get that, you know, exposure and interest to next gen gamers, or else they're not going to take part in anything that we grew up and enjoyed, at least not entirely.
Yeah. And I think like there's been a big movement on that, and I think part of it is like the younger generation can't afford as much, so they're going back and they're doing emulation and they're finding these old titles. And but a lot of them have that, like we had entire generations that grew up with like not even embracing physical media, and now you have a new generation that's like, I want something physical again, right?
Right.
So you're kind of starting to see that turn. You're starting to see people, and have been for a couple of years, seeing people get more into vinyl. Matter of fact, I keep eyeing record players because I keep thinking it'd be nice to, because I never got into vinyl as a kid. It was always like tapes, but getting into vinyl would be nice. It'd be nice to sit down and just enjoy a record, right?
You will, trust me. I still have my vinyl.
Yeah, take your time and enjoy a record, you know? Get some of that, like the the Transformers movie soundtrack or something like that and listen to it. If I don't sit down and just really enjoy listening to it, right? That kind of stuff. And they're getting into these older consoles and older games and stuff like that, and that's appealing to them. Being able to physically own some of these games and have everything be on the cart, and not have to worry about, okay, so I have an hour worth of gaming and I boot up my console and have a 30-minute system update, and then I've got a 2-hour download before I can play a game. Well, I guess I'm not gaming tonight, right?
Yeah.
I have literally had that happen before. I get home, I'm exhausted, I do all my chores and everything like that. I finally sit down to play a game, and not only does the game have an update, the console has an update, or the game has multiple updates, or, you know, something else comes up, and I'll move to another console and it'll be the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, before you know it, you got multiple consoles all doing updates, and you're going, dude, where the hell was my NES when I need it? Where I could just pop a card in and just start playing a freaking game. And they are loving it. I'm just watching Matthew's eyes just dart across the screen. It's the funniest thing.
Gonna need a reboot soon. That's your new moniker, Emoji Man.
Oh, man. Well, it was a blast having you guys on tonight. We definitely need to set up some time to do this again moving forward. I'd love to have you guys on as guests more often whenever you guys are amiable to do it. I don't want to put anybody under pressure on it because I know Matthews isn't big on streaming all the time, but I always enjoy his insight when he comes on and wants to talk about something. So it's just a matter of finding some topics that he wants to talk about and getting him on.
Hatred of Mega Man's 1 through 3 on Game Boy.
No, only two. Only two.
Oh, that's right. Only
I
one.
like 1 and 3.
He has been having fun, like quietly coaching me and teasing me at the same time while I've been going through the Mega Man games on Rumble, and it's been great having you guys in chat. By the way, that's been a lot of fun when you guys come in and hang out on those. I didn't make one this Saturday because I had it. Our thermostat had been on the fritz, and so we've got a new thermostat, so we're trying to get it installed, and it was being a huge pain in the ass. So the breakers were getting turned on and turned off, and turned on and turned off, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to have internet for this stream. So it's probably better I just don't stream today until we get this figured out. And it was like 5 or 6 o'clock from the time she started that project, because she started it when I went to take the dog on a walk. And it probably took a couple of hours for us to finally get it all settled and get it situated to where it worked again. And we're like, okay, that's done. Well, all right, I don't want to stream anymore. It's like 5 or 6 o'clock. I'm just going to call it a day.
Honestly, I would like an opportunity to dedicate a episode or two to the Mega Man franchise with you, Mr. M, because maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think we're like the elitists of Mega Man fans in the community, as I am staring at my pop wall and Mega Man collection. And I think that would be
strong opinions, yeah.
I would welcome your opinions on those as well, and what your experiences were like. I know your videos when you upload them. I love watching whenever you talk about Mega Man, especially.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Can you guys still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right.
You've now been replaced with Elgato.
That's fine. That's weird.
As I throw a bunch of Mega Man emojis on there that I have on Rumble.
I need an E-tank right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys want to do an episode like that here, that's great. If you want to run that on your channel, Zombie, because I can only give you so much input on Mega Man, right? I've done X 1 through 4. I've done 1 through 3 on the original Mega Man series. I dipped my toe a little bit in 8 and 9, but I never got very far on them. I did power up on the PSP, and I'm going through 4 now. So I'm trying to get through a lot of those. None of them are what I'd call easy games, not for me anyway, except for maybe 2. And that one's arguably still hard, but it's far more approachable than what I feel like most of the others are. And I have like 0 experience with the Game Boy versions. So I can't even start to speak to those.
Mm-hmm. But we all want, I think everybody who who has an experience or two with the franchise, that would definitely be a well established conversation. And I know it was a hard time for you, Nick, but I would love to revisit the rage moments on X3 because God Almighty,
Oh
that
my
is
god,
still
X3. Oh my
I still
god.
have that clip from X2.
Dude,
That
X
whole
X
perfect
X3
death.
made X2 look like a balanced game, and I thought X2 was a mess. But the powers in X3 were worse.
I didn't like it. Well, there was a lot less I liked about X3 than many other Mega Man games.
Yeah, I thought
I'll put it
X4 was
that
a lot
way.
more balanced, but I really struggled with Sigma at the end of X4. Like, badly.
Yeah.
Like, Sigma Phase
Yeah.
3 was just awful for me. Up until then, it was pretty doable, and it was pretty well balanced. The powers were great. It was pretty well balanced. It felt a little slow, but I think that's because it then moved over to the PlayStation, and everything felt like it was like much slower than the Super Nintendo versions for whatever reason. I don't know if that was intentional or what, but it just felt slower.
Yeah, it's like with X4, they got to the very end of the game. It's like, oh wait, aren't Mega Man games supposed to be kind of hard? Okay, we'll just put it all into the Sigma fight.
Yeah.
yeah, for
And
sure.
Mazin wants me to play X7.
Yes, I think
Eventually,
you really
I'll get
like
back
that.
to the X series because well, my big goal right now is I want to finish the Legacy Collection one, which is Mega Man 1 through 6, right?
Mhm.
And then I was debating if I was going to pick up the Legacy Collection 2 or any of the X collections next. I would like to see Powered Up get a re-release. I thought that was a really cool, cute
Was really
look with
good.
Mega Man. I really enjoyed that one.
I would say that Powered Up is probably definitely is the definitive version of Mega Man 1. It's definitely one of the better Mega Man games too. So
Mhm.
That one I actually beat on the PSP, but I struggled to do Mega Man 1 on the NES. Go figure. Powered Up just, I don't know. For some reason, I could keep pushing through Powered Up, whereas I struggled with Mega Man 1 all the time.
All right, so hear us out, Nick. Would you want to play through Adventure Island again?
No.
Oh,
I just.
okay.
Well, here's the thing.
I thought it.
1, the game's not that fun. 2, it doesn't look that good. And 3, it's just punishingly hard for no real reason on a game that's supposed to be a cute, fun experience. Like,
you
it
should
just
actually
doesn't.
play 2 or 3.
Do what?
Play 2 or 3 because I think they're actually
The sequels are better.
the sequels are definitely better. There's definite promise with the Adventure Island series that you can see in that first one.
Yeah, I mean, there were some
the
good
second-
ideas
The next
going
two
on there.
actually realize it better.
I just like the skateboard's kind of a neat idea, but it's kind of awkward to control, right? It's very awkward to control. I could have done with just the life, with it replenishing your life, not having your life completely go down, like just steadily going down as you're moving through the stage. So you could have put less fruit in there and just have it replenish his life a little bit. You know what I mean? I feel like that would have been better balanced. I don't know. It's a weird series for me. I'd try 2 or 3. I need to get them on either RetroArch on my PC or on my.
They're much more friendly.
Yeah.
To
Yeah, I could see that.
is Wonder Boy better really, or is it just the same? Come on, Zach.
I mean, it wasn't. They didn't come off as like, Ghosts and Goblins bad, but then Ghosts and Goblins is not one that I'd really want to approach anyway. Like maybe Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, where I can lower the difficulty and muddle through it that way, because I was having fun with that one, even though it was brutally hard. Ghouls and Ghosts, I thought, were both of those, both the Genesis and the Super Nintendo ones were really good, but incredibly tough, right? But at least it kind of felt like you had more of a chance. Adventure Island went from, hey, this is pretty easy to, why the hell this jump? Or, what the hell? What's with this positioning kind of thing? All of a sudden, randomly. It was just weird. I don't know. It's probably just me.
No, I mean that is still the hardest game on the NES that I played.
Yeah, because you were even complaining about one of the jumps towards the end that seemed almost unjumpable.
The jump at the end of 8-3 is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
it was you and
anyone who's
the
made
lady
it that
from
far.
Retro Rivals was talking about it too.
Yeah. But yeah, that jump is kind of infamous, I think. So.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that'll be a thing for another day. Maybe I'll have to dual stream that onto onto YouTube so you guys can clip that and laugh at that. But I think we're going to get out of here. It's almost 11. I've got an early morning tomorrow. I got to be up at like, well, have to be active on my laptop in the morning by 6 a.m. to help with some stuff. So I have to like chill from here, get something to drink, and then pass out so I can get up around like 5:40 or so in the morning. So I'm conscious enough to actually function at work in the morning. So tomorrow's going to be weird. But I knew that walking into the stream. I found out this afternoon that that's what I needed to do today. So we've got to bounce out of here. Again, it's been a blast. If you guys are not on YouTube, definitely check out Zombie's channel. His handle's right there. I don't have their links in the description right now, but him and Matthews both have amazing channels on YouTube. Matthews has a channel he's using kind of as a repository on Rumble. So if you're adamant about not going to YouTube, I do recommend you follow and check out all his content on Rumble that he has. He does amazing stuff, and he does some voiceover work and in front of camera stuff that I just can't do. And it's always amazing. It's always well edited. It's always well thought out and well planned. And it's just a joy to watch anytime you watch it. So I can't recommend these two guys enough. They've been great friends throughout my time on YouTube, and they continue to be good friends and pop up on my show as well as many of the people that are in the chat tonight. So check out some of their stuff, share some of the love, spend some time learning a little bit about their love of their consoles and what they do, because I guarantee you're going to have a good time. But we're going to bounce out of here. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Please come back and visit with us again. And until next time, happy gaming, everybody.
Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.